Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, councillors, good evening to those in the audience here and at home. I'm Councillor Mark Corey, Chair of the Scrutiny Panel this evening on the 15th of February 2022. So I welcome members of the public and councillors this evening and go through the housekeeping first of all. There are no practice evacuations planned for this evening, but if an alarm does sound, please evacuate the Town Hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street, whichever is appropriate, and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Runwood Street. This meeting is being broadcast over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel and will be available to watch afterwards. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcomed, but please have them on silent and do not use the voice or camera flash functions. We may have a break at 7:30, subject to the progress of business. It's likely we will have that break this evening. So I'm Councillor Mark Corey, Chair of the panel and representative of Wivenhoe Ward. I invite other councillors and officers around the table to introduce themselves now. I'll go to my right.
Good evening, Richard Block, Senior Management Team Support for the panel.
Good evening, Tina Bourne, Greensted Ward.
Good evening, Julie Young, Greensted Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Sam McCarthy, representing Shrub End Ward and substituting for Councillor Lynn Barton.
Good evening, Stuart Loveland, Tiptree Ward.
Good evening, Barbara Wood, Tiptree Ward.
Dennis Willits, Lexton and Breezewood Ward.
Nigel Chapman, Rural North Ward.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you all, and as others come to the table, we'll ask them to introduce themselves, officers and councillors alike. Item 2, substitutions. We heard from Councillor McCarthy, he's substituting for Councillor Lynn Barton, and Councillor Julie Young is substituting for Councillor Lorcan Whitehead. Thank you. Item 3, urgent items, we have none. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any councillors? Councillor Young, please.
I'm not sure whether I need to declare, but I will. I'm a member of the Greensted sort of board, which will come up in the presentations on the town deal.
Thank you, Councillor Young. That is noted. Are there any others at all? Okay, thank you. Item 5, the minutes from the last meeting on the 25th of January. Can I have approval to say that those were a correct record of the meeting? I see nods. Agreed, thank you. Item 6, General, have your say. We have no registered speakers. Owen, none have come forward. Okay, thank you. Item 7, decisions taken under special urgency provisions. There are none. Item 8, Cabinet and Portfolio Holder decisions called in for review. There are none. And item 9, A and B, items requested by members of the panel. There are none. So we move to item 10, the opening item of the agenda, which is the Portfolio Holder briefing from Councillor Darius Laws, Portfolio Holder for Economy, Business and Heritage. As usual, we invite the portfolio holders to come along to be scrutinised and to have a 5-minute session at the beginning where you are able to introduce the work you've been doing over the year and tell us about the good things coming along in the future. So we've had a chat, Councillor Laws. I know you want more than 5 minutes. We'll see how it goes. But over to you. Please introduce yourself and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel, for inviting me here tonight. My name is Darius Laws and I am the Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Economy, Business and Heritage. It's a privilege to be here tonight, and in 5 minutes I will do what I can to explain some of the exciting work around commerce and culture that we've been undertaking recently. Our 10-year cultural strategy is soon to be released, as is our economic strategy. These are opportunities for us as a collective, working collaboratively with key partners, to focus our minds in where we want Colchester to go. And I'm confident that it's going to be a really useful exercise in offering a framework to stimulate commercial activities and enrich our cultural offering that's already very, very good. Excellent, in fact. On our NPOs, or the organisations I'm really pleased that we agreed as a new council to fund those organisations modestly on a 4-year basis. I think that was a really important signal to them, gives them a little bit of further security and helps them with their business planning. And it is also the way in which I believe this authority in the long run will be elected. So it will fit in nicely with that, hopefully. All of these MPO organisations have been explicit with me, because I've asked them to their face, about their commitment to things that are beyond just their core function. So I think that's really, really exciting. They are all socially responsible. They all really, really care about their role in the local community and economy. For example, the Mercury Theatre, about 80% of those contracts, where millions of pounds, went to local firms. So they rate their procurement for local suppliers highly. They are committed to recruiting local trainees. There is a commitment from all of them about the public realm around their buildings, and that's landscaping, lighting, and helping to contribute towards creating a sense of place where people will want to go, and that is critical for the vitality of our town centre. The doors of First Sight and the Mercury in particular during the daytime are open, and they're open if you need a coffee, or if you need a quick toilet break, or in my case, to change a 2-year-old's nappy. And that's a wonderful feature to have. You don't necessarily need to go in there and buy something to be able to make advantage of that opportunity. The success of these organisations is down to them, but our involvement and our support and our logo in association with them is very, very important, and long may the partnership work continue. On heritage and our museums, and I will dwell on this for quite a bit, I'm very proud of the partnership approach that we have with our friends in Ipswich. It means that we have shared knowledge, economies of scale, savings, and it means that we can programme events to complement each other and not necessarily directly compete. Colchester Museum last year launched a development foundation. There was a gap in that we didn't have one, and now we have a formal mechanic to assist in corporate sponsorship and fundraising via adopting various artefacts in the museum. It's very early days, but the uptake is looking promising, and it was the right thing to do. Numbers-wise in the castle, we are now back at pre-pandemic levels. In fact, we're slightly exceeding that, so that's a really good sign. Although I accept that there's a little work to be done around schools, but I think we will get there. And you also notice that there's been more events, and that's been quite hard, obviously, in the last 2 years, but there has been a concerted effort from Pippa and the team there to bring about more reenactors. There's been dragons, and I'm very grateful that Father Christmas was able to find some time in his busy schedule to come back to Colchester again. Those events are great because it brings people into the town centre. Long term, I make no secret of an aspiration that I have, which is that I think we should be looking at what we can do with the roof of the castle, because in my mind it would be fantastic if it was a Kensington rooftop-style garden experience where we could sell some more coffee, some gin and tonics, and maybe have some weddings and events up there. That is long term and very aspirational, but it's a conversation that I think should be had. Over the road at the Natural History Museum, we're going to see a capital refurbishment of that building, hopefully. We need to bring it up into the 21st century so that it is more energy efficient and so that it makes better use of space, and so we can sell some profitable coffee as well. I pay particular tribute to Dr. Frank Hargreave and his colleagues who have gone above and beyond, and my predecessor in this role will know just how hard it's been with COVID. But the staff went above and beyond, and they've gone into realms of communications that they wouldn't necessarily have thought they'd be doing, like presenting videos and putting those online. Frank's taken some direction from me, and I've asked him to do some things, and I'm going to share with you now some of that because it is exclusive, I think. You'll have seen that we've updated lots more signage around Colchester, and there's more work to be done on that. One of the things I'm really excited about is the reinstatement of a Roman mosaic. We believe it's about 25 feet by 25 feet, a metre down in Red Lion Yard, just off the High Street. We know it's there because the Victorians found it, and we excavated it for some service work that had to be done in the late 1980s. I've managed to get hold of a corner of it that the Victorians lifted, And when we find the rest of it, we're going to reinstate that in the ground and do what's happened at first sight with Berry Fields, so that people can feel that Colchester is a little bit more Roman than it does at the moment. We're looking at Gosbecks, but we're realistic about it, because actually, whilst we would all like a visitor centre there, something like at Highwoods, maybe aspirationally in the long run, something like Sutton Hoo, we've got to be realistic. There's no point actually in sort of running before we can walk, and so we're going to be partnering with the HE institution rather, to do some proper research there to see what we've got, because that will help inform the interpretation in the long run. Duncan's Gate in Upper Castle Park, one of the 6 original Roman gateways into Colchester. It's been on everyone's minds for a while, but there is an opportunity there to potentially create a new entranceway into Upper Castle Park, interpret what's going on there. I haven't lobbied the leader for a budget to rebuild it, because I think we have to be realistic, and actually the fact that it's there and it fell over is part of the story. But we need to do more to interpret it, and conveniently around the same location is a secret World War II bunker and some Roman drains, which I think is an exciting opportunity to have a look at and see how we can get the public more involved and learn more about that. I also would like to see, though no resource has been allocated, some live digs happening. We saw with the Mercury Theatre redevelopment how many people walked past and saw what was going on and engaged with that when there were formal open days. And I'm sure if COVID hadn't happened, we'd have seen more of that over at the Lexington Hospital site. But actually there is going to be regeneration happening in the town centre, where we know that there are stratified layers of Roman deposits that need looking at, and other eras, in fact, and people are interested. They should be able to see it happening live and learn more about it. Finally, next year there will be a Gladiator Exhibition in the castle. We're very, very confident it's going to be a success, as was the Decoding the Dead exhibition. We are likely to be able to get the famous gladiator helmet from Pompeii in Colchester, which will be a real coup, and we're going to collaborate with the Business Improvement District and other organisations in the town centre to really unleash all sorts of entertainment and fun around the theme of gladiators in Colchester. And so if Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott are watching, gentlemen, you'd be most welcome to come to Colchester and learn more about Britain's first Roman city.
Thank you.
And I could talk to you in depth about the Mercury, Fairside and the Arts Centre. I also need to talk to you about business and licensing, but I was conscious of the 5 minutes.
Thank you. You had about 7, but it's always interesting, Darius. Good to hear. Thank you. I've got a few questions, and I'm sure there are many around the table. I'll start with a few and then pass on. First of all, I actually wanted to say thank you to the staff in the cultural sector and the leisure services that are partly in your department, but partly not, and the museum staff who, during COVID, really stepped up into so many different roles, running the vaccine centres up at the stadium, for example, and just being excellent in their flexibility to be multi-skilled and to help the whole organisation and our whole community and the whole town. So thank you again to them and those people that are back in their full-time jobs working underneath you in the cultural services. One thing you mentioned was the castle and schools and saying we will get there. Just out of my interest as a school teacher, I think it's highly valuable that we get that relationship rebuilt again. And I think there's a fine balance between cost and experience. We want the young people of Colchester and further afield, but Colchester, I'm sure you can find the best balance for them coming and paying. But I think that it's really important, that valuable experience they gain from coming here to the castle, but also around the town and the different bits you've explained this evening that we have. Can we find a way of enticing them back in, understanding that they have very tight budgets, but that balance I'm happy to support, to see how far you can get with that. I also enjoyed seeing in the newspaper your sort of excavation in the drains, those Roman drains that I didn't know about. Would enjoy a visit down there. So again, more of an encouraging sort of point here to carry on expanding on anything we find that's new and take it forward, understanding the costs, but understanding the cost benefit of bringing those things alive. One thing I spoke to you just earlier about was fixing the link, and just wondering where we are with that at the moment, because that brings in some of your heritage aspects, but business as well, the entry into the town. And I understand during my time in administration how long that has taken to get it right, and wanting to green that area as well. So I just wondered if you could update. My other points were really points rather than questions. So the last question is fixing the link, and an update on that, please. Thank you.
You're absolutely right about the schools. If we don't get our young people involved and inspired now, then we might not have them in the long run. So absolutely, we're going to work hard on that one. And fixing the link is a great initiative. I used to live directly in the area, so I saw it daily. We are going to see effectively mini parklets where there'll be trees planted there. Long overdue. In fact, if anything, I think that it would have been lovely if we could have had more permanent lime trees there. But I realise that that highways have their needs there. We are going to see some the yellow signage that was there originally. It's now 5 years old, and I've asked for that to be looked at. I understand the need for it to be yellow, so it's really visible. But I'm concerned that some of it's blank, and that's a missed opportunity. So even if it's a case of having, silhouette buildings, silhouette Romans, Celtic people, whatever, I think it just needs to be a bit more dynamic. But I respect the need for the yellow to stay. We're going to see some Union flags put up around as well. Not on every lamppost, but we're going to do it obviously with the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and there'll be a lot of that on the high street as well. I think fixing the link has more work to do around the lighting up of the Roman wall, or is that us? Who does that? I don't know, but it's just obvious to me that when you're walking or cycling or taxiing from Colchester North Station, as you approach the original Roman city in the evening, Middleborough is completely dark. And you will know how good the Balkan side of the wall looks at night, and I think we need to get there on Middleborough, but we're not there now, and there isn't a resource or a plan to do that. We are going to see the bridge given a bit more than a lick of paint. That is going to be happening. And we are, fingers crossed, going to see the water fountain refurbished at Middleborough, which is not an easy task because, as you know, at the moment, it is effectively just a monument. We thought that was a nice thing to do. So it's a complicated street, isn't it? It's a very transient street. And I'm conscious that, with the increase of car driving, fast food deliveries that are happening, that actually some of that area gets blighted by people mounting the pavements and idling their engines. And I certainly implore Parking Partnership to take a firm line on that, because it's not fair for those that are walking around with mobility wheels or prams. It's not right. And the engine idling is, as we all know, not good for our health. So work is underway. I don't think that it's something that we could kind of finish in a sense that there's always going to be work to do there. It's a transient area, it's a busy area, but it's going to be improving all the time as far as I can tell.
Thank you, Darius. Just a small supplementary to that. One, good to hear they're remaining yellow on those flags, but I have always agreed actually that they're too blank and they do need more to them. But just bringing together your heritage and business aspects, but also your keen cycling, the suggested active travel changes along North Station Road, do you understand how that's going to interplay with still supporting business? Because I go down there and support the local businesses, which actually there's some really good new ones down that road. I want to support active travel. I want to see cleaner methods of getting into the town. How do you think that's going to interplay with your two hats, really, in terms of supporting active travel but getting the business support there?
It's a really, really good and a really hard question, isn't it? My understanding is that the focus on active travel is going to be east to west at the moment, and that effectively the north to south dream segregated cycle scheme is not going to be happening anytime soon. I can tell you that to try and make the situation better with the engine idling and air quality and cars mounting pavements, that staff are trying really hard to talk to the Deliveroo food drivers about the use of potential e-bikes and other methods of getting food around quickly. And that's something that we're doing proactively. And I think that has to be part of the package to get people to, if people can see e-bikes around the place and think, do you know what, actually, maybe I can do that. And maybe I can get to Highwoods in just the same time as I would in a car. And it might even be that there's a cheaper option for me, and it's greener and healthier, and I get to benefit from the health of cycling. So there is some work being done. I struggle with the macro about active travel, because I'm one of these guys that's fortunate enough to be able to cycle, to be able to get on a bus once an hour, not in the evening, may I add, but I use all modes of transport, and I do have access to a car, but I realise that not everyone does, and I was walking down East Hill the other day, and a spin scooter on a pavement in the dark nearly wiped me out. So when I see those comments online about scooter behaviour, I genuinely understand the anxieties that people have. And ultimately, I think in this small shared space that we've got to try and get on together a bit better and use our eyes and smile and maybe slow down a bit, actually.
Thanks, Darius. I'm taking you slightly away from your direct portfolio, so we'll move on to others, but we both champion the e-cargo bike project, and that definitely is something we want to see delivery drivers taking up. Thank you. Tina, you are next. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hello, Darius. I notice you wax lyrical on 3 of your portfolio areas of responsibility. You do have 15. You made tangential reference to 3 or 4 others. So I'm going to ask you about some of your other areas. I was surprised to see, because I'd forgotten, that tackling deprivation and inequality was in your portfolio and not in the old communities portfolio where it's been housed for a number of years. Can you tell me what you've been doing in this area? And is it there to take advantage of the levelling up agenda? So partnering with skills and learning. And can you assure us that the other areas which tackling deprivation and inequalities from, that was previously in the communities area around food, fuel poverty, financial poverty, not just the skills poverty, are also still being addressed within your portfolio?
I can tell you that within the economic strategy, one of the central strands of that is going to be around employability and skills. So that's happening in the long run. And I do have some notes to support your question here. We've obviously been partnering with our healthcare partners on a range of initiatives to try and tackle, as you say, the disparity in life expectancy. In just a small part of the United Kingdom, we have there was nearly 8 years disparity between one ward and another, and that is something that has to be looked at. You'll hear more tonight about it, won't you? And Councillor Young has already declared her interest. But this authority is supporting the work that's going to be happening into Greenstead to bring about, hopefully, some positive changes there. Housing standards matter. Public realm matters. You'll hear me wax lyrical about public realm in the town centre. I really think it's critical. If a place doesn't feel right, friendly and enticing, then you quickly have the broken window effect. And so I have no qualms about spending public money in improving the public space. There's been a number of initiatives. We obviously have a benefits and welfare service in partnership with the DWP to help people get back to work. That is important. Our housing staff, I know firsthand, they go above and beyond, and they try and tackle people's challenges holistically. People that aren't getting shunted around, from one computer says no to another. Actually, people are caring. People are trying to help people take their lives forward. And I also think that that art is something that sometimes not. It's seen as something that you only a certain sector of the community can enjoy. Actually, art is for everyone, and by saying publicly that we back First Sight and what they've done, for example, with the hot meals campaign in school holidays. I mean, some people will say, well, why is an art gallery doing that? But actually, there's a two-pronged benefit to that. If you get people through the threshold, not only are you giving them some access to some food that they might not have that day, but also you're hopefully inspiring them for the future to take up art as an interest. Thousands of people have gone through First Sight and done that. If only one of those turns out to be the next John Constable or Damien Hirst, then we've done a great thing there. My understanding is that through all facets of the Borough Council and our partners, we are working in partnership. Whether that's with the CCG, whether that's with Essex Police, and I know that our staff care.
Thank you. you. I would agree that our staff care. I think they're very caring. I think the partnership work has been built up over many, many years. We're the one organisation that hasn't been reorganised, I suppose, where other partners have had to be. I noticed, Chair, that Darius, you used the word realistic 3 times in your presentation.
Sorry, what was the word?
Realistic. And I think that's very honest of you to use that word realistic, because I know when we were having conversations about Gosbeck's Archaeological Park, you wanted the sky and the moon and the whole universe. But when you come into power, you do actually have to change your assumptions and look at what's to be done. And I think that's my plea going forward, really. None of us should give false hope to residents. And that doesn't mean that we talk down what we can do as a local authority, even if it's with our partners. But there has to be an air of realism in what we are providing, regardless of the portfolio, regardless of how much we hold that as an individual, as a want. It has to be, going forward, something that is realistic. Because I think, if anything, the last 2 years has taught us that if you want to get things done, you have to be honest about what can be done in the time scale, with the funding envelope, with the skills and the capabilities of the human resources that are available. So looking at that and the priorities that you have within an administration, how well do you feel that your portfolio sits with the other portfolios and the realistic things that they are now thinking about? Are you gung-ho going out there, nailing your colours to the mast, everything for economy, business and heritage is going to be delivered on? Or are you looking with the other portfolio holders about, you've got a couple of months left until we hit the elections? Are you revisiting some of the things that you could be doing?
I think it's a very fair observation that when I was in opposition and even a younger person, I probably did want the sky, and I've done a lot of learning. I could commission something for £20,000-30,000 that I could stand next to and be photographed next to. Could do it around Gosbeck's, couldn't we? Around the car park. But I deliberately haven't done that, because I think that would be, quite frankly, immature. And it would be electioneering for the sake of getting a photograph in advance of a May election. I would say that this does add weight to my point that we shouldn't have annual elections when we can save money, be bolder and more strategic by having it every 4 years, and stop the silly electioneering that could happen. But we haven't on Gosbeck's, and museum services have said to me, you've talked about it for a lot. What would you like to do? And I've said, well, you tell me. Because actually, for the cost of building a Highwoods centre, I might be able to make a choice. Well, let's not light up Middleborough section of the Roman walls, because we might be able to just about have a temporary wooden structure with basic facilities there. But I haven't done that. I've listened to the advice of the officers. I'm not electioneering, and I'm realistic. Another area, we've got in store Roman mosaics. So, I've said to museum services, well, let's get an expert in to tell us what we've got, to conserve what we've got, and that's not going to make a very good photo. and I want to stand next to something Roman and say, come to Colchester, and look what we've done, by the way. Of course I do. But you have to walk before you run, and I'm trying my best to strike that balance. If I went into the leader's office tonight and in front of Cabinet and said, I want £250,000 to light up Middleborough, I think they'd probably kick me out, and quite rightly, actually, because that is an awful lot of money. That's what it would probably cost. I really, really want to do it, but not right now. Not right now. So I'm not being a greedy fisherman, I think, in answer to your question.
Thank you very much. Your group leader is nodding behind you, so you got that one right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tina. And it does remind me of the years where you did say, we want to light up the wall, and I had to say we didn't have the money, but eventually we got round to it between us, so we got there. Thank you. I've got Councillor Young and then Councillor McCarthy so far, and Nigel, thank you. So Julie.
Thanks very much, Chair. Darius, good evening. Like you, Chair, I'd like to pay tribute to our fantastic museum staff and our cultural organisations that really do enrich the lives of local residents and bring visitors to Colchester. I've got a number of questions I want to ask you. So the first thing is around the cultural strategy. I assume you've had a look at that already, and you may not want to reveal too much about it, but I'd like to have some reaction from you in terms of whether you think that that was value for money and whether that was a good thing for us to do, because obviously that has been ongoing for some time. I sit on the local plan committee, and a recommendation that came from the local plan committee was about, we put together the fantastic master plan in terms of the Abro site, and I know you're passionate about the Roman Circus, as I am, but a recommendation came from the local plan committee that the Cabinet looked to purchase that site, and I wondered if we could have some reaction to where we are with that proposal. Things are extremely quiet on the Alumno site. Economic development is within your gift, and I wondered what the up-to-date position on that was. Sorry for the list, yeah, you're keeping notes, that's good. You remember the debate at full council around celebrations for the Queen's Jubilee, and I think a number of councillors spoke in that debate, and they put forward a whole gamut of ideas from mugs to mazes, frankly, and much more between. So I wondered what work is being undertaken to involve all members of the authority in terms of planning what we're going to be doing to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee. And finally, it's about perception. I got myself involved in a thread, I think it's, I don't know, the Old Fogies thread or something. Many residents, despite how much we invest in heritage, still come up with, why can't we value our heritage like they do in York? And I believe you used to say Lincoln as well. So, you know, what can you suggest in terms of changing perception around how much we do invest and value our heritage? And what initiatives, you said you've taken a lot of advice from officers around things that perhaps you thought was a good idea to pursue, but then have been minded to follow the advice of officers. So what changes or initiatives have you personally driven?
I think I missed your first one, sorry.
Well, the first comment was just to paying tribute to our museum staff. So I asked about the cultural strategy and your perceptions about that.
Okay. Right, the cultural strategy. I have been involved. I've seen 2 iterations of a formal document that I've been able to offer some advice on, mainly semantics, to be honest. I think it has been a really good exercise. I think it is absolutely critical to celebrate the great things we've got, but look about how they could be even better. Look at their standing within the community. I think it's important that the Borough Council is able to say with confidence, look, you know, this is public money, and we are making effectively a political decision to modestly subsidise some of these organisations. And is that the right thing to do? For my money, it is. But I think it's right that the strategy looks at that and looks away from the NPOs and some of the smaller organisations and some of the sometimes non-tangible stuff. So, you know, there are people out there that are very gifted playwrights. There are people out there that are gifted artists that don't necessarily have a home or you know, put their stuff on walls in the Minories or in Fairside or whatever. So yeah, I think it's been a really, really useful exercise. And I'm confident it's going to also foster an environment to potentially to have that cluster of creativity, because actually through creativity you can have commerce, and making our town centre the best it can be, and making sure that it is vibrant can only happen through creativity and culture and art. So yeah, I think it's been a good exercise, and I won't share any more of the detail because it's going to go to leadership on Thursday for a review before I get to rubber stamp it. But thank you for your work in initiating and on it to date. Abro site, Roman circus. Wow, the only Roman circus in the country. There is a management plan there which has some very clear red lines, which is good. We need that. And yes, you did ask, and this council did put in a bid for the land that was available. I haven't been formally briefed on the outcome of that, but I'm sure that the imminent news will be available on it. And yes, we must make sure that the Roman circus opportunity is maximised in the long run. You asked me about alumni. That's probably a question for the leader, but for my money and for the record, I don't think that a gated student community in a monolithic style development there was or is the right thing to do. That is my personal long-held view. The gated bit is particularly offensive, actually, because it should be there should be public space there. We've been talking about public realm for months now, and we're doing it, aren't we? We're doing it with St Nicholas Square, we're doing it with the Mercury and with Jumbo. And then right next to an amazing arts gallery, we have a gated community. It doesn't make sense for me. But I realise that the lawyers are involved. And I'll also add that, when we came into administration, we were aware that some urban regeneration schemes that were underway were potentially working in what I would describe as a piecemeal environment. And with the lifespan of St John's car park, with the NCP located where it is, with Essex Highways wanting to reconfigure St Botolph's Circus, the opportunity there to do something really big and exciting is obvious, and it needs to be done together. And when people talk about, this St Botolph's cultural quarter thing, I shut it down really quickly because the cultural quarter is in Colchester town centre. It's inside the Roman walls. And you can't say that the Mercury and the Arts Centre are not in a cultural quarter because they're over there. The culture is everywhere. Alumno, the leader might be able to add some value on it in the long run. Jubilee, we're going to be releasing a pack at the end of this month to enable communities to get better support on what they might want to do. There are obviously oak tree opportunities for all. I think, there were lots of ideas. I don't know where we're at in terms of a maze, because I quite like that one. And I think that you have to get a balance between doing something that has a bit of legacy and maybe not promising every child in a borough a mug. But there is something else that actually, in relation to the Queen's Jubilee year, which is the Commonwealth baton might be able to come through Colchester, which could be quite exciting, a bit of a relay. We had it, didn't we, in 2012 with the Olympics, and I was there on that rainy day. People came out to see that, and I think that's an important, lovely thing to do if we can do it. But it will no doubt pose some logistical challenges. You asked me a question on heritage, and I didn't write down the question.
Just to repeat that, I said that, there's often a perception in the wider general public that we don't prioritise and support our heritage like York does, and I think you used to say Lincoln. So how do we change that perception? And the second part of that question is about, what have you personally driven in terms of initiatives on your areas of responsibility?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I get frustrated like you if I see those Facebook groups or Gazette page comments that we're not doing enough. I mean, from what I can tell, we've all signed up as councillors, all 51 of us, to the corporate strategy of doing more. I think probably going back 30 years, it was about the buildings and the cabinets and what's inside them. And I think there's been a real modal shift lately, and an acknowledgement that actually, the museum is here, it's everywhere. And I've certainly given museum service staff a very firm steer that, it isn't just about what's inside the castle. Let's find ways of having events and activities outside of the castle to bring people in, just in the same way that you can walk into Trafalgar Square and see wooden hoardings with prints of Constable and Gainsborough works to try and entice you into the building. And I think throughout the old town of Colchester, where you have public realm opportunities that play a nod to our past, it might be that there's a Colchester-fired bollard. Actually, it really does matter that the paintwork is up to date on that, and that housekeeping is in order. Public realm matters. St Nicholas Square is going to be very exciting, as will be the work around Jumbo and Jumbo itself. I personally have had a hand in Jumbo in the sense that I've always been banging the drum for the regeneration opportunity that it is. I believe it will be a major catalyst for bringing more people into Colchester if we get a lift in the inside of it, which I think is critical to the scheme. The detail about the operational side of it, I'm more relaxed about at the moment, but I want people to be able to get in a lift and get to the top. And then that's whether you're 4 years old or 90 years old. And I think that'll be really, really exciting.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. Next on my list, I have Sam McCarthy, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Darius. I will fire away with my 4 questions, 2 on heritage and 2 on economy and business. Starting with heritage, with the Natural History Museum, I won't bang on about it, but it's got quite a special place in my heart, and it was quite, with respect, run down. I'm just interested in there was a consultation. I just want to know if you have any idea on what the public take-up was on that. What are the next steps and what are the funds available for it? With regards to Gosbecks, you brushed on it briefly. There was a task and finish group that one of their recommendations, or in fact a resolution, I think, was to put a visitor centre there in Gosbecks. Have those plans been scrapped now, and if so, why? The third one is, I saw an advert the other day on Facebook that was about working from cafes, so people leaving home working from a cafe instead. Is there a partnership in place with our cafes? Are we monitoring the feedback? I've done it myself, and I was good. I bought more than one coffee and food, and the staff do get a bit wound up with you sitting there with laptops. So are we working with the cafes on this? Will we get feedback from them? Is there some sort of partnership? And the last one is just kind of regarding skills and learning, I guess, getting people back into work. So there's going to be a hub in the town centre, and I can't for the life of me think what it's going to be called, but it's, you know what I'm trying to say. There's a hub where helping people get back into work, financial troubles, that kind of thing. Obviously, that's town centre. Are we going to be reaching out to more deprived communities or areas where there is less work available, should we say? That would do nicely, Chair. Thank you.
Lovely questions. I like that last one. So the hub you refer to, I'm guessing you're talking about Holy Trinity Church and Community 360 that will be moving into there. That is a really, really great project. Again, great partnership work. We have to make sure that our buildings have a use, because otherwise they fall into decline. And it can cost even more money, can't it? So I'm really pleased that we've got a really, really good tenant coming in there to improve that building, give it a use, and do some great outreach work. I'm very cognizant that there are opportunities in the town centre, and we sometimes sort of put the focus on the town centre. But as I said to our NPO institutions, how are you reaching out to people outside? And I think it can be done quite easily, actually, in some instances, with targeted Facebook marketing to specifically go to an area where you know that your audience profile is weak, and they have that data. And so I'm very much hopeful, and I'm sure they will be monitoring the usage of where people are coming from, and it can't just be a town centre thing. The fact that the town centre is on bus routes is good, because people will be coming in from Tiptree and further afield. So yeah, I'm confident on that. On the cafe front, I'm unaware. There could be some monitoring on usage, but you make a really, really valid point about the changing way in which people are working, and I think that the Grow On space on Queen Street to complement the existing space studios and the cafe down there, and First Sight, all that is going in the right direction. It's what we need to do. It's about creating that environment for a water cooler moment, because you've got loads of freelancers in Colchester. In fact, 97% of Colchester businesses are small or micro. Huge chunk of those are micro. You know, it's freelancers who occasionally bring in a friend when they're not available. And actually, they do need somewhere to have a face-to-face water cooler moment. And, you know, let's be honest, it's probably over a beer rather than a glass of water or a coffee. And I think we're creating an environment for that to happen in Queen Street. And there'll be more of it. You know, we work buildings happening in London where people come and go, and not just 9 to 5. And that's also an important part of the conversation. You know, so when Park and Ride finishes at 7 o'clock, but you've got freelancers that have just come back from doing something exciting, even outside of Colchester, who return back to their place of work to dump their tools, which might just be a laptop or a camera or something. You know, they can't get on a Park and Ride bus and go home after 7, can they? And so it's joining those dots up. But I think, yes, we're going to see more dynamic ways of working and more people in laptops day and evening in Colchester. And that will be a good thing. On GOSBECs, look, I think I've answered it in the sense that, yeah, I might have been able to persuade Cabinet and the leader to pour some concrete somewhere near the car park and do something in a way of a visitor interpretation centre, but it would have been modest with the budget that there is, or rather there isn't, but you know, and yes, maybe in my 20s and before I'd got my head around the site, I would have been gung-ho saying we must have this, build it, they will come. We have to find out what's there. It is the reason why we're all sat here tonight, that site, and it has some secrets, I'm sure. And so we need to partner with a it's a university partnership to do some research there, to find out what we've got and how that might inform where we go forward in the long run. But it will be exciting, and it is my aspiration. I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but you know, walking around Sutton Hoo, you know, it's a field with some mounds of earth. You know, so when people say to me, "Well, there's nothing to see," well, actually, you know, sometimes you don't necessarily need to see grandiose new structures, but you need to understand what's there and why, and how that fits into the story. And it's a major part of the story of Colchester. On the Natural History Museum, yes, there was great feedback from all sorts of people, which has informed ideas that we didn't even think of, actually. So the thing that popped up in the feedback was that people really liked the tower itself. Well, when we were sort of thinking, well, let's find a way of making the building energy efficient, and let's make sure it's safe and secure and it doesn't have a moth problem and all the other obvious things that can happen with an old building. And we were thinking of, you know, potentially putting in some sort of annex, maybe some sort of use of the graveyard, particularly at the rear, which at the moment just feels sort of like the rear, the end that you don't go near, and it's actually a main route on the way to First Sight. We need to sell coffee in there, and I really value that space. I used to take my little boy in there and point at the big shark's mouth. And with everyone caring about the environment like they do, it's great we've got it. I back it, but we've got to sell coffee in there, I think, to bring in a bit of revenue. The tower itself poses an interesting dilemma in a sense that I don't think you can get up there too easily, but who knows? You know, now that feedback has come in, we will, with the architects, look at what can be done. It will be a multi-million-pound bid, and you know, I'm confident under Dr. Frank Hargreaves' leadership that we'll be able to get it, and it'll be really exciting for Colchester. So yeah, fear not. It is a priority of mine. I do not want those doors to close because the fabric of the building is you know, leaking energy everywhere, and it's got a moth infestation. I'm not saying it has, but you know, it's an old building. It's well overdue for an upgrade. And along with Holy Trinity Church, going back to my point, you know, these buildings have to have a purpose. They have to be used in order to survive.
Thanks, Darius. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I now have Nigel, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a bit worrying when I hear somebody the age of Darius talking about he may not see it in his lifetime. It really concerns me. What will I not see? Oh. Maybe next week, who knows? But yeah, a couple of questions, Darius. I mean, I started out my career on the Borough Council's Vice Chair of the Cultural Activities Committee. That's as far as I got in cultural activities, really. I got diverted into other things then. But I'm very enthusiastic about what does go on in the cultural activities in the town, and will echo very much what has been said about the staff in that area. I mean, I think they do a tremendous amount of brilliant work. and the amount of work that's done to get visitors and so on and so forth into the town centre, the economic side of that is absolutely crucial to us all. One question on the town, if I may, and I want to divert back to our sort of joint area of the rural North Ward, and some questions about the rural side. I just wondered if you, at some stage, could give us a little bit of update on how you see the business improvement district going. And that isn't mentioned very much at the moment for obvious reasons, I guess, but just how you see the future of that and how it's succeeding. My sort of rural questions go back a little bit to what I think it was, Tina was asking about the deprivation and inequalities. And funnily enough, I've had two questions on today very much along those lines. I think you were copied into one of the trains about restoring the, we used to have, in 3 of the villages in our ward, we had a little laptop in some of the hubs in the villages, and people would come in there and have a sort of a lesson on how to get into those sorts of things. That obviously went by the wayside. The whole thing didn't work very well anyway. That's several years ago now. But I do think there's a very, very much a deficit of skills in IT in the rural areas. And there's a lot of elderly people now in the rural areas, as you well know. I think we owe it to those sort of communities, to those people, to try and bring them back a bit of knowledge of that somehow. And I think that's something that could be flagged up, and somehow we do need to take that on board, please. And the other question is another one that you'll be well aware of. As more and more people are now sort of going out and about, following the COVID situation, during COVID, into the countryside, walking and that sort of thing, we have got an issue around how we get them to respect the areas they're going to. I think I can put it that way without going into too much detail. Again, I just wonder if there's anything you think in future the council could maybe assist with that. I'll put it no stronger than that. I think that's a sort of 2 things on that rural aspect I wanted to ask you about. Thank you.
The Business Improvement District has been a wonderful thing for Colchester. I used to talk a while ago about how it done wonderful things in the city of Lincoln, where I lived for 5 years. We're playing catch up a little bit, but it's doing great things. With the Gladiator Exhibition next year, for example, I've said to them, well, why can't we have some actual gladiators, like what we did with what was done with the zoo in Colchester? Let's have those gladiators, and let's make them interesting things to look at that then can be auctioned off for the hospital or a charity afterwards. But the sighting of those is only going to come about by an organisation like the Business Improvement District being able to spot the opportunities of where's best to place them. Are they inside? Are they out? There's just a very real example. But I like it because it's not me as the portfolio holder for business to tell Colchester Business what they need to be doing. This is an upward-led organisation where they're paying into it and they have a stake in it. But in all my dealings with the leadership there, I'm very happy that they're doing good stuff. We've got challenges, haven't we? Town centres have challenges. The good news is, and I think I can say this, the regional and national average vacancy rate for shop units, it stands around 13%. In Colchester, it's at 8%. Now, that's a really good indication, isn't it? That things are okay. There's always room for improvement. The perception, as Councillor Young says, is reality, and there'll be people who are probably listening tonight in St John's and maybe Prettygate who have a perception that the town centre isn't as good as it was 20, 30 years ago. And I think, and I listened to a podcast today by a 53-year-old bloke called Damon Alburn, and he was pointing out that, things change. And being aware and empathetic and understanding of change is an important life skill to have, because otherwise you're going to get a bit bitter and frustrated. And change doesn't have to be a bad thing. We've seen, haven't we, large departmental stores pull out of town centres. And yes, that can be painful. But actually, in the void, filling the gap, are other leisure activities. We're seeing people going into town centres now to play crazy golf, to do bowling, to see more on screens in cinemas, and to eat more. People will say, yeah, well, we've got too many eateries. Well, the market will call it, actually. The market will decide if we've got too many eateries or not. As a freedom-loving Conservative, I like choice. And I think Colchester does have choice. Your second point was about accessibility to all sorts, but as a consequence of not being IT literate. And I'm alive to it. I recently attended a Women's Institute meeting in a rural village, and the average age in that room was about 75. I hope they're not listening, because I might have got that one slightly wrong, and they might not forgive me, but I think it was about 75. And I certainly met an 80-year-old who said to me, I can't use the internet, I don't know how. Now, I've got a 90-something-year-old neighbour who does, and she emails me regularly, and that's our sort of preferred way of communicating. But I'm alive to it. I always give my mobile phone number out to people so that they can call me at a time that suits them. It might not always suit me, but I'll do my best. And I think you're right, Nigel. There is some work to be done there, and it may be that actually we can, our frontline service areas can look at maybe partnering with, for example, Age Concern Colchester, and seeing what initiatives can be done to take, I don't know if laptops in village halls is realistic everywhere, but certainly the opportunity for I don't know, someone like me whose own mother isn't very IT literate, to be able to say to her, did you know that between 10 and 12 in Hawksley Village Hall, you can pop in for a free basic IT skills session? I think it's a very good idea, one that I've not personally been pushing at the moment, but I will take it away and see what we can do, because no one should be denied access to information or to services or to feel part of the community. Sorry, Nigel, question 3 has gone out of my head.
Just about the use of rural areas during COVID and the pressure on those areas.
Absolutely. I mean, we're lucky, aren't we, where we live, to have such officially beautiful landscapes. And longest coastal part of the country. Slight dispute with Devon there, but I think we'll claim it. Look, it comes with challenges. I know that we've been proactive with communications around litter. I've seen myself targeted. I don't know why they're targeting me, because I never drop litter, but I have seen adverts saying, please be considerate of the countryside. And it's all sorts, isn't it? It's about parking your car on verges and damaging them, not just litter. I'm alive to it, and I think, we need to be grown up about it, and I've never shied away from enforcement and gentle encouragement where it can be done.
Thank you, Darius. I do see another question from Dennis, and it's sort of blur bingo with you. I knew you'd bring in at least one reference. It may have gone over people's heads, but I got it. Thank you. Councillor Willits, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 or 3 questions which I'll ask separately so that Darius doesn't forget what my last one was. The first question arising from your last response in regard to the Business Improvement District, where you were saying really it's up to them to decide where they want to go. I would have thought we need a closer relationship with the Business Improvement District, because when you look at what other districts have done, look at the scope and the encouragement that they've received from their local authorities. For instance, York has been talked about a lot this evening, where the local commerce groups have taken over the town's information office and run it at no cost to the city council. We see other bids where they've taken over the car parks and run it as an integrated retail offering, rather than having a separate structure where the council effectively provides the car parking and takes £3 million worth of tax out, and the shoppers don't actually feature in or to any great extent in that particular equation. So are there areas where you as the portfolio holder for business can perhaps give a bit of steerage and encouragement to the bid to make sure that they are looking futuristically as to what they can provide and improve within the town centre?
So we obviously have a very, very good relationship with the bid. We work successfully with them on the parklets that you see in the high street, which have been held as a success. We're working with them to look at wayfinding in terms of locally artistic commissioned archways on Sir Isaac's Walk and Headgate Street. The Click It local platform, really good initiative, and a strategy for the hospitality and leisure sector, working with them I'm not sure about car parks. And the example you cite sounds a very interesting one. I think an area where most certainly I can give the bit a very big steer on is the need to make sure that Colchester maximises its footfall opportunity around events and the unique events that Colchester can have, particularly in something like August and September. I would love to see on a Sunday a decision made that we would shut the high street down and have an antiques fair or an art fair or something like that, first Sunday of the month type of stuff. I think there's a huge opportunity around the Mayor's office here and Colchester High Street and Town Centre around the Oyster Feast. I don't understand why the Oyster Feast is over at 6 o'clock on a Friday in this building. I just don't get that. It doesn't make commercial sense. Frankly, we should be selling oysters and gin all over Colchester in the days around that event. And I think through the Business Improvement District Zone, if they were agreeable, their members, we would be able to see footfall coming in here, just like people go to York for the Viking Festival on a freezing weekend to see Vikings. I think we can do it with oysters and Romans.
Thank you. My second question, Chairman, is on the interrelationship between several of the items in your portfolio, and particularly skills and learning and economic development, which I see is going hand in hand, and wondered what monitoring, what control and what encouragement you're giving to ensure that those who are dealing with skills and learning are acting as effective resources for their customers who are in economic development. And if I can just illustrate that with an example, Colchester really is one of the regional leaders in restaurants and hospitality. Yet when we look at Colchester Institute, they are running down their courses in catering and front of house management and hospitality, which seems a bit of an anathema to me. And so I wonder, to the extent to which you're looking at what skills and learning are doing in the education sphere and ensuring that that is closely coupled with what businesses want in terms of the skills, the number of people with the appropriate skills to ensure that they can develop the town to its maximum.
Really interesting point you make about the hospitality sector there. I'm going to be straight with you and tell you that, because of COVID and because of my infancy in this role, and maybe I won't be here for much longer, who knows? But this is an area that I do need to do more work on, Dennis. I'm aware of that. So I'm not going to lie to you or try and spin to you. I'm alive to it. I think that the Wilson Marriage Centre does great things, and that, them getting more investment is really good. But yeah, I've been focusing on our NPOs and our heritage in recent weeks in a big way. This is an area that I'm going to need to look at to satisfy your question. But rest assured, I care.
And my final question, Chairman, is about the real thing. I remember my first visit to Sutton Hoo, and you've spoken about that on several occasions, Darius. And I went into the interpretation centre to look at the mask and was flabbergasted to find that the one they had there was a plastic imitation. And in fact, one had to go from the Essex-Suffolk border all the way down to the British Museum to see the real item. Then we had the Fenix treasure trove, which was discovered. And to see that, I had to go down to Fenix store in London. So I wonder, what is your policy on ensuring that the priceless treasures which are discovered in and around Colchester are exhibited in our own museums, and people from Colchester don't have to travel halfway around the globe to see something which should be on display in the museums under your control and authority?
So the Fenix treasure is back. It's back in Colchester Castle Museum. Yes, you're right, it was on display briefly in a Fenix store and more recently as part of the Neuro Exhibition in London. Look, I don't have an ideological problem with any of the nationally significant finds that are found in Colchester making a little brief tour. And if that means that they are loaned to another museum or institution, and in return, for example, you know, we are hoping to get this Gladiator helmet from Pompeii. Well, we haven't found a Gladiator helmet in Colchester. So to be able to borrow one from Pompeii is a great thing. So I think it would be churlish of me to deny the sector the opportunity to share the love a little bit. We are very lucky to have what we do in Colchester, and I am sure in our lifetimes we're going to find more significant finds. They could even be just beneath where your car is parked this evening, sir.
Thank you. Lots of good questions, and Darius wants to keep going, but we do have a long agenda, and other aspects of the town deal item next actually do touch on your portfolio, so I would encourage you to stay. Yes, Darius.
I feel like I've not really given our MPOs the love they deserve, because I whisked through what I wanted to say earlier, but I just, for the benefit of the record, would want to point out the great work that First Sight, the Mercury Theatre and the Colchester Arts Centre do in ensuring that our town centre is a vibrant one. They really care. They really care. They're doing amazing work, and they've got my full support. As have our licensing staff in taking tough lines on organisations that don't play by the rules, and as have our business staff, revenue collection staff, in doing great work in distributing recent government grants to help support those businesses survive. I think I should mention that tonight.
Oh yes, definitely. When I was still at the helm, we were very, very proud of the business support that was given out, some of the fastest in the country and accurate as well. So thank you for touching on that. We do have the arts organisations coming to the next scrutiny panel next week, so I did say to you in the corridors we will touch on that further then. We invite you back again if you are willing next week to come. But also, just to say, I know we've dwelt on the castle and the museum surface. That is an MPO as well, isn't it? So yeah, we have more than just the three mentioned. So thank you, Darius. I think we've covered a lot. There's lots more to do. We'll see you again, I'm sure. So thank you. And I think we've done what we've been asked to do, which is scrutinise the portfolio holder. We have no recommendations coming out of that, so there are no specific actions required. I thank you, panel, and thank you again, Darius, for your honest answers there. We will move on. So we'll move on to item 11, the work programme. We'll take this one quickly before we move on to the other agenda item. Owen, the work programme, we agreed that not much more would be shuffled around at this meeting, and if we do have any changes, the next meeting next week, we could attend to them then. Over to you.
Yep, that's the case, Mr. Chairman. So I'll take this report as read. There have been no substantial changes to the report as it stands now compared to at the last meeting, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Just to say, as spokespersons, we did consider that, so it's not that we're just rushing through it, but I do have one of the spokespersons, Councillor Bourne. Tina.
I'd just like to confirm, Chair, that we are scrutinising next week according to the service level agreement and not asking for a presentation from the arts organisations on their magnificent work, granted, but we are just sticking to the service level agreement with the council for the council's funding.
Yes, we've covered that with the arts organisations and with the officer who prepared the internal report. I was just cautioned that when talking about that, we should talk about funding agreements rather than service level agreements, as there are specific legal ramifications to the difference.
Thank you, Owen. Point taken, and thank you, Tina, for going through that again. We have been quite specific to the organisations that they aren't coming here for a whole presentation all evening. We are being very focused in our scrutiny. Okay, so panel, we've considered that. Are we happy with the work programme and happy with adjustments next week if we need to? Okay, thank you. Good, excellent. Moving on then to item 12, the town deal business cases. We have a number of officers here this evening. We have Matt Sterling must be online. and also we have Matthew Brown, but we also have the Chief Executive, Adrian Pritchard, and other executive officers coming to report on the themes that we have in the town deal business cases. We also have Simon Blacksall, Chair of We Are Colchester, which is the board of the town deal We Are Colchester project. We also have Tracy Rudling as well as another member of the board, the CEO of Community 360. Can't see her online this evening. We may have her, may not. And Glenn Crickmore from Essex County Council Youth Services for one of the particular business cases on the townhouse. So, who am I going to ask to come forward first? All of you. Excellent. And if you can, I've only mentioned Adrian at this point, but if you can introduce yourselves when you do speak, that will be welcomed. Thank you. So just to check, we have a possible break at 7:30. Do you think you'll be able to run through all the themes at that point and then we have a break? No? Okay. How long do we think we'll need for this part, this presentation?
Chair, I would suggest, because this is a very significant set of programmes for you and business cases, we believe that we would like to take 35 minutes to take you through that. Only because we believe this is an important part of the assurance that you would give or not to the Cabinet and then on to the We Are Colchester Town Board. So we would perhaps like to do the presentation, and then if you wish to take a break, and then we can take questions if that works for you and the panel.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's vitally important that you convey everything you need to, and then we store up our questions. So panel, if we can do it that way, that we have the presentations first, please take note on the themes and the business cases you want to then ask questions on. We can do it that way. Councillor Willits, Dennis.
Chairman, could I just ask your guidance about exactly what we are doing this evening? Certainly looking at the order paper on page 31, there are 4 points confirming the ongoing commitment, noting the findings of the 151 officer, approving the town deal business cases, and D, approving us as the accountable body and the summaries going forward. Now on A, B and D, those are effectively high-level tasks where we have to ensure that the appropriate steps have been done and followed, and that there is a proper threads and thinking behind the projects. I have considerable worry about point C, approves the town deal business cases and the summary documents, because in what we have scoped out for this evening, I'm not sure how we're going to do that. Having read through them, each business case would probably take half a day for this panel to carry out a green book contextual analysis, looking at the methodology and the content and the findings, and ensuring that it was consistent with Green Book methodology and the other issues which government has asked. So I can see this evening we can get through A, B and D with the high-level presentations that are being suggested, a half-hour presentation and a few questions. But I'm a bit stumped as how we can actually add value, or actually say on C, we approve the business cases, given that there just is not time even to scratch the surface of the business cases this evening. So I would just like a bit of guidance from you as to what we are trying to achieve this evening.
Thank you, Dennis. I have sympathy with your point there, absolutely. We have discussed this as group spokespersons as well, what we could realistically do, and we ensured that we had the business cases sent to us in as earlier time as possible so we could look through them. I do agree that to go into absolutely every detail would take longer, and we can definitely deliver A, B and D. I just am concerned in terms of how realistically, what other alternatives we do have. We have another meeting next week because we have a busy schedule as a scrutiny panel. So in terms of our opportunities to delve down deeper and take the half a day, as you mentioned, it may take, I think we'll do our best this evening, as you say, on A, B, and D. C is something that we can give, I think, our guidance to the Cabinet on, and I think it is our role to continue to scrutinise this piece of work, so it may be a 6-month report coming back. And I think something we discussed as spokespersons as well was how do we get that accountability? How do we get that project management? How are we assured? And where will that project management sit with some of these projects? So I think some assurance that the detail will continue to be scrutinised by boards within the council or within the councils, including Essex County Council, we might have some assurance of that. And I think those are questions we need to ask tonight. In terms of the realistic nature of C, I have no further answer. That we do our best this evening, and if we need to go further into detail, we'll have to discuss recommendations at the end of the panel.
Just on methodology then, Chairman, I am happy personally, and clearly it's a committee decision, I'm happy on C to accept that much of the work we would probably want to do and check has been done thoroughly by the Section 151 officer, that the projects have properly been prepared by the Wales Colchester board, that they've been scrutinised by a whole bevy of officers, and I'm happy personally to accept that the work in C has been done properly without us having to repeat it in any way at all. And I would be quite happy just to concentrate on A, B and D this evening and accept that those with greater experience than the panel have produced the evidence in regard to C, which we can just accept.
Thank you, Dennis. I think it's a point that the officers have heard this evening, so if we can have that assurance as we go along, I think your conclusions there are the best that we can aim for, really, which is to get some assurance, which, again, we do know the Section 151 officer is here this evening. He has looked through all of the business cases and has worked on them, his whole team. So again, we have some assurance, but I think officers have heard it this evening from what Councillor Willits has said. If we can make sure in the brief time that we have assurance that these projects and business cases are stacking up and are going in the right direction, overruns, problems with inflation, etc., do need to be highlighted at this point as well, so we can understand how they will be managed. But realistically, we'll do our best to cover all of these items and see where we get to at the end with item C. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to Adrian Pritchard to start off the presentation. Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. I know Owen, I hope, is going to just project for me some slides. Can I just first start by perhaps addressing that point, which is, I believe you have in front of you the owners and sponsors of the overall programme and the individual projects within that programme. And I think our job tonight is to give you confidence that you should have the assurance that we have in place a proper set of disciplines that allow us to say that actually these business plans do conform with what government has asked for. Government has asked for a Green Book appraisal of each of those projects, and our job is to assure you that we have prepared those properly and in accordance with what government expects. And you're quite right, the Section 151 officer is there as part of the accountable body, which Colchester Borough Council is, that actually he has been through these in very great detail to make absolutely certain that they do comply and that he is prepared as your statutory Section 151 officer to sign those off. And I'll come to that right at the end, if I may, in this presentation, Chair. Is that okay? Just very quickly, I've got perhaps the easier job than my colleagues. I just wanted to take you just through a couple of slides to position this. I think the first slide we've got, Owen, is we've called it history and governance. Actually, it might be context and governance, perhaps, but history and governance. So, just in terms of the history itself or the context, you will know 101 English towns were invited to submit a town investment plan and to bid for 25 million. That is what we did. We also, as part of the governance and the criteria that government set for a town deal, we put in place a We Are Colchester Town Deal Board, which brings together business leaders, community and statutory organisations such as the Borough Council and the County Council in that board. We submitted our town investment plan looking for our £25 million, and I will come to the urban area in a moment. And the award was made that the government would offer us 18.2 million, and actually they agreed a further £1 million of accelerated funding, so a total of 19.2 million, which is not an insignificant amount of money to try to look at how we can improve significantly the offers that we have in Colchester under a range of criteria that the government set out. So again, Chair, I won't take you through any more of that. That is up on the screen, and we're again happy to share these slides with you at the end of this if we haven't already done so. So Owen, thank you for that. Just in terms of governance, again, the Towns Fund prospective set out the programme criteria for government. And what I would just stress is that the geographic boundary of each town was set by government. We did not have much of a say in terms of the geographical boundary that government set for where you spend this money. And I know that's really important to a number of members and councillors within Colchester, which is, well, why not my part? Why not my place? Why not my ward? And I absolutely understand that. But we were constrained by government deciding where the boundary would lie. And then again, the themes that we needed to address were the urban regeneration planning and land use, as you see, skills and enterprise, and the connectivity, the physical and digital connectivity within our place. And those are the things that we have majored on when we started to identify and work with the community and with partner organisations about the sorts of projects that we would come up with. Again, they have to be strategic and they have to complement other investments that have been made in the place. So again, it was really important for us that we engaged, and you will remember, Chair, as will others, that actually we did have an engagement stakeholder group as well as a more significant board that looked at a range of projects and identified which ones were the most appropriate. And I remember spending a lovely evening in this moot hall with you one evening when we did look to engage a range of organisations and individuals in that engagement. And again, as I say, just finally, Colchester Borough Council is the accountable body for the funding. And I think members may want to come back to, well, what assurance do we have that actually we are able to perform that role of the accountable body? Just very quickly, Chair, we've just put up the map there. That is how the government drew the boundary around where the town deal funding could be used. And it is quite a broad area, but it does tend to concentrate clearly on the urban area and not the rural areas. There are other funding opportunities for rural areas that, again, we would like to pursue, the County Council pursues, etc. But that was set by government. And really, I'm going to do a fairly short introduction just to say that we have got 14 projects that were identified following a fairly significant engagement with organisations and individuals. And those 14 projects are on the left-hand side, as you can see. And we have put those into themes so that actually we then can group a number of those because they're all about that particular theme. So the digital working hub, for example, transform youth facilities, town centre and gateways, you'll see 2 or 3 projects in there, etc. And my colleagues are going to go through just a high-level summary those themes and those projects for you, Chair. Just finally, for me, the budget, you will see that the budget is there. It was set at 19.2 million. I would say that we have had some challenges already. As you would expect, when we started this process, we probably had not seen the increase in costs for major development and major capital projects that we've now seen recently. So we've already had to, through the Town Deal Board, actually look at how we allocate and reallocate funding to bring us back into that envelope of 19.2 million. And as you can see at the moment, we're at 19.218 million effectively, but we are confident that we will get within that 19.2 billion envelope. So again, a piece of assurance that we've already done that process once to bring back our projects back into the funding envelope that we've got, and we will continue to do that through our programme office and our programme management of these projects, Chair. Chair, I'm going to stop there. That was my bit. As I said, I probably have the easier bit. I'm going to turn to my colleagues. I'm going to turn to Lindsay Barker, who's going to pick up the first set of projects for you.
Thank you, members. So, as the sponsor for the 3 projects within the digital connectivity work stream, I'm just going to lead the overview of the update on those 3 projects. They do have to be presented individually as business cases within the overall Town Deal package. We have a digital workstream board that I chair, and Leonie Rathbone is the Assistant Director who supports me on that digital workstream. So firstly, we'll start with the Digital Working Hub. We've had quite an interesting discussion already about skills tonight. So this is partly about skills and partly about the ability for grow-on opportunities for businesses within the digital sector. Just to be clear, because obviously the council is also leading the development of the grow-on space itself, so the redevelopment of the old bus depot. The Town Deal funding is actually, so it's 900,000 for this project, and it's actually for the kitting out of the digital lab that will be within that space to make sure that we get the 10 gigabyte broadband connection. I can't even picture what that looks like, but to make sure that the infrastructure goes in to enable the technology within that building to work effectively. It also enables a rent-free period for the operator within that building to enable them to get established and to really focus on how they get the skills element of that project up and running. So that's what the Town Deal funding supports, but obviously it is very connected to the overall project there. The progress on this project is exciting. So we have appointed an operator to run the facility, AIXR. Their chair is a local person, Daniel, so that's very exciting. They also are specialists in this area and have a national and international profile. So I think in terms of the capability they bring to the table early so that we can work with them to make sure that the project is kitted out appropriately is really exciting. And just on the next slide, just a few reminders really of the key regeneration aspect to this project as well. So it will contribute to the regeneration of the area, the wider grow-on space, as well as being a vital plank of our economic strategy in terms of the digital sector and its contribution, particularly in Colchester. So next slide, I'll move on to the Digital Skills Hub. So again, within the digital work stream, we have a great focus on skills, which from the conversation tonight, I think you'll all agree is actually crucial in Colchester. So this is led by our colleagues at the Adult Learning in Essex County Council. So this will be using an underutilised gym space and turning it into a dedicated digital skills facility at the Wilson Marriage Centre. It will be, again, a 900,000 investment, and it's refurbishing the building and supporting the digital fit-out and some initial funding to get the staffing, etc., in place. This project is is really exciting actually, because it gives a standalone facility within a wider facility that can be open at all hours, but also can be hired for community and business use. So it can be a flexible space as well as doing the dedicated digital work. It will contribute to upskilling residents to find work, but also increase higher earnings potential through increasing skills as well. So crucial, and it is linked into the apprenticeships agenda and a flexible approach to learning. And again, if we move on, it's a pretty uninspiring space at the moment. It's underused, refurbishing, providing updated technology in there, and then a real focus from the Adult Learning Centre to bring people in to access those opportunities will be very welcome. Thank you. So the final project in the digital area is the 5G technology deployment. This is led by Amphora, working with, on behalf of Colchester Borough Council. It's £1 million of investment. As you'll probably know, with 5G technology, it's very expensive. So this is scratching the surface and really trying to tackle market failure to see whether we can deploy this technology successfully in the town centre and then encourage the market to follow. So it will deliver a connection and pilot the use of the technology. The initial pilot, and again, quite topical tonight, is linked to virtual reality-enabled tourism. So really looking at some of our heritage assets and looking how we can bring the benefits of virtual reality to enhance the experience for our visitors. If we can make that pilot work and get the learning from it, then it can be rolled out more broadly. It has, so the 5G technology deployment is also benefiting the Digital Working Hub. There's been a lot of cross-working in this work stream between the three projects, and that's pretty crucial, again, for the technology that we'll need in the Digital Working Hub. So thank you. And I'll hand over to Pam now to pick up on the youth facilities.
Thank you, Lindsay, and good evening, members. So I'm the sponsor for this project, and you'll see the high-level summary on the screen there, with a very high ambition to achieve happier, healthier, and more confident young people across our population with improved life chances and reduced inequalities. Quite a tall order. And the investment that we're seeing here of 1.32 million in transformed youth facilities will go some way to achieving that. Before I go much further, I would just like to acknowledge that this evening we do have with us virtually Glenn Crickmore, the Youth Services Lead for Essex County Council. And I'd like to acknowledge his leadership along with Ben Randall, who many of you will know, particularly if you've been to see these youth facilities face to face. And they've worked really well in partnership with the project lead, Lucy Bredman, on this work. And we've relied very heavily also on partnership working with our LDP, Local Delivery Partnership, colleagues, as well as the voluntary sector. So a really good example, I think, of where the statutory provider, Essex County Council, has worked very effectively with Colchester Borough Council representing the place. And I think we'd all agree, because I think at some point or another over the last few months we've talked about the impact of the pandemic on young people and the difficulties as we move into a recovery phase that those young people face around social isolation, poor mental health, access to skills and jobs. Again, the theme is building, isn't it? Particularly around some of the digital work. And the investment, not only here, but right across the Town Deal project, you will see, really favours investment in young people, whether it's the work that Dan's leading in the heart of Grinstead, or the 5G project and the digital hub work you've heard all about, or even the safe cycling, making sure that young people can get safely to locations. But the focus for the next few minutes for me is going to be, if you'd like to move on please, Owen, on the £1.32 million investment in youth facilities, which will go towards the improvements at Colchester Townhouse and also improvements in our facilities in Stanway and Highwoods. And I think what's important about this investment is that it's all going towards existing facilities, building on what's already very strong in communities and for which there is a great deal of affection and loyalty towards some of these centres. If we move on, please, Owen. You'll see some of the images here, and as Adrian said, you'll get these slides, and I know some of it's in your pack anyway, indicate that an upgrade is most definitely required at the townhouse, whether that be the upgrading of the sports hall, new teaching kitchen to make sure that young people have access to skills to help them live independent lives. Some really very important and necessary basic work around redecoration and the electricals. And for those of you who know the townhouse, just a stone's throw away from this building, you'll know that the outside isn't as welcoming as it could be, and therefore the opportunity to, that's probably underestimating it, Councillor Bourne, the opportunity to invest in the outside space and that make that more welcoming is really vital. And again, the link into upgrading the IT, it's just not good enough in order to meet the needs of our young people. So some images there, if you'd like to move on, please, Owen. You'll see what's known as the den and the upstairs space. Again, it's looking rather tired and dated, and although improvements have been made over time incrementally by Essex County Council, this investment of 600,000 in the townhouse is most welcome. Move on. Just some images there of the sports hall. Let's move on then to our communities in Stanway and Highwoods, which will benefit from further investment. Many of you will know the youth centre is a modern building in Stanway. The investment is relatively small, 170,000, but it is intended to build on what's already there. And you'll see from the brief summary on your slide in front of you that it's already very well used, but it really could do with sprucing up, a bit of a decoration and upgrading of the IT, which you will know needs to be updated on a regular basis to keep it current. We could move on, please. Owen, you'll see again some site, if you haven't visited the premises, these are some of the rooms that are used to facilitate either enjoyment or learning, or both. Can you move on, please? And a little bit about the investment at Highwoods. This is an interesting one, 120,000 going into the Highwoods Youth Centre, which is used by a relatively small number of groups, but I think it's very important, and it's hidden away in that paragraph at the bottom there, a very important investment in young carers. And I think we all know the challenges that young carers face and the impact that the pandemic has had, particularly on those individuals and the people for whom they care. This particular location, it's very small and tucked away, and you'll see an image in a moment, I think on the next slide, please. And as you'd expect in Highwoods, surrounded by beautiful trees, but very small and limited in its scope. So again, this safe place for our young carers and for some Sunday school users from St. John's will be upgraded to reflect the needs of young people. So in essence, our aim is to try and create more conducive environments that are right for young people. And just thinking here about the point that Councillor Willits was making earlier about the difference and how are we going to know that the impact of our investment has been a positive one. And again, I would point to the fact that we're reaching very high in terms of our ambitions, looking to increase skills for young people within Colchester and the surrounding areas. Secondly, to make sure that there is more access, it's easier access to improve well-being, mental health, and issues around social isolation. It's also going to give, whether we're looking at Stanway, Highwoods, or the town centre, an opportunity for greater engagement across different groups and encourage social mixing and making sure that there is an increased level of services and quality of services available. Specifically in the town centre, the investment in the townhouse will increase the footfall within the town centre itself, and in Stanway and Highwoods we are going to see in our communities that are very dense in terms of our populations and also very highly represented by young people, an investment in those spaces that are already being used. So that's a high-level summary of the investment in youth facilities. Obviously, we'll take questions at the end, but I'd like to hand over now, if I may, to Lindsay again to talk about the town centre and the gateway investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. So I'm also the programme sponsor for the town centre and gateways. There are several projects within this area, but they're all captured in one business case as required again by the town deal process. So we've got 2 heritage assets being brought back into use through this work stream, Holy Trinity Church and Jumbo, as well as some key public realm schemes and the curbless streets. We also have 2 accelerated public realm projects under the umbrella of this work stream. One's already delivered, so the Balkan Gate Phase 1 connected to the Mercury Theatre redevelopment is already delivered, and we're about to start on site with the St Nicholas Square project. So those are already in train. Thank you. As Adrian mentioned earlier, we have already, because we've had the benefit of the 2 accelerated schemes in this area, we've already identified issues around cost escalation, particularly in relation to those public realm projects. And we've been able to take action early within this work stream to mitigate the impact of that cost escalation. I think the sense is that we're probably at the worst point in terms of costs at the moment. So we're working from that basis going forwards to make sure that we can manage the delivery of these schemes going forward. So we did take action pretty quickly and took some recommendations through to the We Are Colchester board so that we could manage the increasing costs that were identified through the feasibility work. And because quality was deemed to be really important in terms of the outcomes, especially around the public realm schemes, we have made some adjustments that were signed off by the We Are Colchester board. I'm just going to quickly run through those now. So 3 of the projects, the allocations have not changed. That's largely because they form part of a wider funding package. So Jumbo, Holy Trinity Church, and the Essex County Hospital site are all part of a wider funding package. So those allocations have not changed. We have increased the funding to St Nicholas Square because that's the first one that came through, and we needed to mitigate the cost impact on that scheme. We've reduced the cost for Balkan Gate Phase 2, and actually being able to deliver still a very good quality scheme there, but worked around some of the existing green features in the area to make sure that we could manage the costs. We've put forward a lighter touch scheme for the Holy Trinity Square, which is the area surrounding the church, and reduced the scope of the curbless streets to Sir Isaac's Walk, and removed the Vineyard Street public realm from the scope of the town deal altogether for when that comes forward as a project in its own right, and the viability on that can be assessed in the future. Thanks, Owen. So just quickly running around the images. So top left is the Holy Trinity Church. That project's led by Community 360, as you will know, a very well-established local organisation. They have benefited from considerable support, so we did put technical expertise in to support everybody in developing the business cases. And I think Community 360 would say they've really benefited from that help and support, and actually will go on to help them with their wider funding bids that they'll need to make for this project for Heritage Lottery funding, Architectural Heritage Fund, etc. And that support will continue as well. They're developing a central community hub facility, meeting, training, event space and a cafe, and our contribution is approximately 1/3 of the overall cost to ensure that they've got some good quality match funding in there, but also so that they can do some of the initial works that are required. Bottom left is the revised Balkan Gate Phase 2. So as you can see, the kind of almost looks like a helicopter pad in the bottom. That's the footprint of Jumbo. We took Jumbo out, or you can't see anything. That's where Jumbo will go, is there. But the overall scope, so it continues the work that's been done in the Phase 1 through, but it also retains more green spaces. This is a project that's led by CBC, working with Amphora. In the centre, obviously, no prizes for that one, is Jumbo. It's a Grade 2 star listed building, as you know, and through this work on the town deal, the council's been able to support the North East Essex Buildings Preservation Trust to secure both the lease of Jumbo from the owner. They've got a 150-year lease, which is required for them to be able to be part of the Town Deal programme, so that's brilliant news. And the Town Deal Fund, so just over £1 million investment, will support some of the structural repairs that are required and will enable that application to National Heritage Lottery funding, again, to develop the vision for the building overall. Top right is Holy Trinity Square. So again, we've removed the Holy Trinity Church in the middle, otherwise you can't see the public realm. But the light touch scheme there will still ensure that there is good access. There's currently very limited public access to that space, and it's such a key space in the centre of town. So some paving to enable good access and to open up some of the green space for use both by Community 360, but also by the community. It will also fund improvements to Trinity Street. So we keep that connection running all the way through and down to Sir Isaac's Walk. That's also a scheme that's a CBC scheme that's being delivered also with Amphora. The bottom right is Curbless Streets. That's the Sir Isaac's Walk stretch, which is also a CBC-led scheme with Amphora, and that's all about ensuring that that area is more accessible. You know, it's quite a key part of town, but the different heights, it's quite narrow, and the different pavement levels make it very difficult for wheelchair users to access. There's also a secure bike facility going in the area, so it will enable cyclists to use that stretch safely if they need to, as well, and to access the secure bike park. We had a site visit out to Jumbo, so just so you can see the potential of Jumbo. I'm sure you already know it. Next slide as well, Owen. But there's some really fantastic opportunities. Look at the views. So if they can complete the works that are funded through the town deal, then there's a real opportunity to bring that really open to residents of Colchester. Thank you, Owen. So I also have the joy of being the programme sponsor for the physical connectivity workstream as well. So this is primarily around walking and cycling. And for this one, we've really focused that the benefit in Colchester is we have an established local walking and cycling infrastructure plan, the LC WIP, and we already had a priority route, LC WIP 4, to make sure that we can improve the connection between the town centre, Greenstead and the university. Really important project to make sure that we can support safe cycling, access, and if we're putting a lot of the facilities into the town centre or in and around the town centre, we need to ensure that those are accessible to our residents in Greenstead and to the university. So it's a new or upgraded 2.9 kilometres of walking and cycling. There's new facilities, lighting, cycle parking, and improvements throughout the route. Some of the funding, the match funding for this work stream is contingent upon us getting Active Travel Fund 3 from the government. If that doesn't come forward, we're very clear what we will deliver with the County Council without that funding. So we will focus on the areas of the route that are most important and then come back to the opportunities on those areas that we can't do in the first round. So we've already been working with the County Council who lead this project to mitigate any issues around budget on this particular project. And just really quickly, for those of you that are interested, Owen, if you want to move on, they will be in the pack. Next slide. There's some photos from a walk of the route that we did that just show the key pinch points and what we are hoping to do with the town deal funding as opposed to with the wider funding allocation. And you can just flick through those, and they just show those key. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with some of these areas, especially if you walk and cycle. So some really needed improvements to this key route. I'm going to hand over to Dan.
Thanks, Lindsay. And just to say, we've already seen some of the really important connections between the projects, because I'll be talking about the Heart of Greensted project, but actually the physical connectivity route that Lindsay was just talking about is an absolutely key enabler for our project to ensure that residents of Greensted have a safe method of active travel into the town centre. Also links in directly to the Wilson Marriage Centre, which is along that route, if you know it, through the moors. And of course, the youth facilities project that Pam was talking about, again, some really strong links in with the important relationship we have with young people in Greensted. But I want to talk about the Heart of Greensted project, which is certainly the most significant programme in the town deal in terms of funding from the government. So it's about a third of the total funding coming into this programme. And although the picture in here shows the centre, the area around Tamarisk Way, which is a key focus for the regeneration element of the programme, it is much wider than that. And I'll just say that this does have the potential, notwithstanding what Councillor Bourne was saying before about false soap, but I genuinely believe this has a transformational potential for Greensted. It absolutely is the focus of all the partners involved, that we see this as an opportunity to tackle the inequalities that we see prevalent in Greensted and elsewhere in the town. And whatever your definition or thoughts are about levelling up, I think the Heart of Greensted project really sums up what that should be about. Asset-based, community-led, and actually that approach that we're taking has already driven some key changes in the business case, which I'll talk about. You'll know that this estate is amongst the 10% most deprived areas in the UK. And yet, even in the short time that I've been involved in the programme, I've seen that it's got some of the strongest ambition, sense of pride, community, assets, and strength of feeling that you'll see in any part of the country. An area that's quite honestly been let down by public services over the years. Public services that have tried to fix a problem a bit too late, rather than intervening early, and drawing on the strengths in the community to give everyone the best start in life. And I think that's a real opportunity for this programme to help to get us closer to that ambition. In 2017, a master plan was developed with partners drawing on a community consultation process. We had about £300,000 of funding, partners were involved, and it did provide a really exciting blueprint for some of the physical regeneration, particularly of the Tamarisk Way area. Led by housing, using that to leverage in additional investment and hopefully then bring together services and improve the public realm. But it had a viability gap, a significant viability gap. And the reason this programme was put into the town deal bid, and we're really delighted that it was successful at the first stage, was to help to close that viability gap, estimated at about £6 million, which is the value of the town deal investment. We realised very quickly that actually that wasn't the whole gap. You'll know from the Cabinet report back in November that we were, I'm delighted to say, successful in achieving a further £2.3 million investment from the government's estate regeneration or brownfield regeneration funding. Both that and the town deal funding, of course, being key elements in the government's levelling up white paper. But what's really critical is the partnership, and I'm privileged enough to chair the Greensted Programme Board. And around the table, we've got key partners, not least our ward councillors around the table tonight, but also the leader of the council, the voluntary sector, Essex County Council, the university, the CCG, North East Essex Health Alliance, but most importantly, members of the community. Community representation has been on the board from the start, and we're strengthening that. From just the last meeting last week, we've agreed to double the number of community representatives, so we should have 4 people around the table, making sure that voice is absolutely heard in those critical meetings. So we'll just quickly go through the next few slides, and Matt, I think, is driving these. So first of all, this is the objectives in the town investment plan. And I think they are really important objectives. They pick up on a couple of the other sub-projects within this programme, which are the Essex Pedal Power, otherwise sometimes known as Big Bikes, based on a scheme that was in Birmingham, and also the Livable Neighbourhood Scheme, which is, again, strongly linked in with the physical regeneration project mentioned earlier. Both really key projects, but significantly smaller sums of money than the main element around Tamarisk Way. On the next slide, you'll see that we, as a programme board, have got greater ambitions than that, and I think it was very clear. I'm sorry that you can't see these very easily in the room, but essentially what these do is set out a whole range of additional outcome areas that the board feel we should be striving for this programme, and I think reflect the ambition that I touched on at the start. And on the next slide, this is quite important because it shows in a sense, the journey we've come on as a board and as a programme from essentially the starting point in the bottom left of the diagram, which, by the way, measures sort of deliverability of the outcomes we're looking for on the left against a sort of time complexity on the bottom axis, from a sort of do-nothing option, which isn't really an option if any of us are serious about the changes that we want to see in Colchester, through to option one, which is the 2017 master plan. And actually, that did form the basis of the original bid. So I guess we could have just said, well, okay, we'll just dust that off and see if we can deliver it. But actually, that wouldn't have been authentic to the ambitions around community involvement, and actually more than that, being community-led. So we're at the stage now where we have what I sort of call option 1+. It's a refreshed master plan. It's picking up on the ambition that I've talked about already this evening, but that actually only gets us to what we would describe as an outline business case. It's good enough to submit for the town deal process, but we know we need to go further, and the full business case will be developed in the coming months, assuming we're successful with the town deal funding, and take us to a much more exciting, as I've put it there, an exemplar of what we see in the North East Essex Health Alliance neighbourhood model, and you'll have seen presentations, members, on that before. The Central Colchester neighbourhood team has gone live already, and the South Colchester integrated neighbourhood team will incorporate the Greensted area, and is a key focus, of course, for all partners to ensure we make a success of that model. So I'm really pleased to be able to say that we are absolutely as one with our colleagues in health and the voluntary sector, working with them and the community to ensure that we really test what we mean by an integrated approach to public services in such an important area of deprivation. And then just a few of the specifics in the programme. So one really important aspect, which I've briefly touched on already, is this community health and wellbeing hub. This will really be the centre of the integrated approach and reflect some of what we're learning already from the hub in Longwire Street, and that will move into the Holy Trinity Church that was mentioned by Lindsay. Actually, this hub, what we're looking at is examples like Bromley by Bow Centre, which is members on the board mentioned this, and we've looked at it, and it seems like a really great example of what could be achieved. If you look at some of the impact reports that Bromley by Bow have produced, you'll see that what they do is really focus on listening to people, understanding the needs of the individual, but understanding how that will help benefit the wider community and really strengthen the whole community by focusing on individuals and families and understanding their needs, but also looking at the wider range of services, not just public services, not just health services, but of course, much more importantly, wider community services that will benefit all generations as well. Next slide, please, Matt. And just briefly on affordable housing, another key change from the original master plan is that we are looking now at 100% affordable housing. This is a provisional figures from the business case showing the potential mix. I say potential and provisional deliberately because this hasn't been designed yet. This is where we're at with our refreshed version of the master plan. But of course, we haven't done the full community consultation yet. So how can we assume to know what the right mix of housing is yet? But this is an example for the business case that shows that the numbers can work, that we can deliver a significant number of new housing and a range of home ownership models, but all affordable. And next slide is a timeline. So just to explain where we are, we have gone live with a consultation just in the last couple of weeks, which is very early stages, just starting to get a feel for what people feel and understand about Greensted and about the centre, the Tamarisk Way area in particular, helping to develop our insights about the community and what their aspirations are, which will then feed into the wider consultation in April and June. And I think I've got a couple more slides. Apologies, Adrian. We'll go through these quickly. Yep, that's just a picture of the leaflet, so look out for that on social media. Please repost, share, tell your friends, because we want to get the message out there and ensure everyone knows about this. Yes, there's an opportunity to win 50 quid, but it's a much more important consultation than that. And there's a few issues and risks and mitigations really focused around the community and making sure we get this right and we don't let them down. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Chair, just back to me, you do have your section, our section 151 officer, I know, on the Zoom virtually. So if you did want to have a conversation or some assurance from him, then by all means we can ask him. But certainly from my point of view, there are two roles here. One is the Section 151 officer has that statutory role to look at all of the business cases under all of the themes and then look at those criteria which are at the top of your chart there. So things like, is the business case proportionate to the scale of the programme or the project? You would expect a very, very significant business case for the Heart of Grinstead, which is worth over £6 million to us. You would expect a proportionately smaller business case. It's still significant if you've looked at them on some of the other projects. But again, he has assessed whether or not they are proportionate. He's checked whether they comply with the Green Book assessment that is expected by government, value for money. You can see them set out there for you. So I'm not going to go through them, but he has given a green rating on all those projects against all of those criteria through each of the business cases that he and his team have been through. Chair, just finally, the second role is for me as Chief Executive to sign off that bid through the Colchester Town Deal Board and submit it to government by the 24th of March, which we hope to do perhaps earlier than that, but that's my job, that's my role. So I see that the end of my tenure as Chief Executive it will be the submission of the business cases. It'll be for others to pick up the delivery of each of those projects in time. Chair, thank you very much. That's the end of our presentation. I don't think we make any apologies for the length of it because it's nearly £20 million worth of really significant projects that we believe make a massive difference to the borough and its residents. And finally, just to say, you will see the executive management team is here. You've heard that assistant directors are also involved in terms of each of those projects. So again, what I would like to impress on you is that you should have some confidence and some assurance that there are very significant senior managers who are actually stewarding this, managing this and leading this set of town deal projects to make up the town deal itself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Lindsay, Pam and Dan, for those very in detail presentations, and we've got the business cases in further detail here. I think that was a really well-timed set of proposals. Thank you. So you've given us just enough detail that we need, and we've got more to ask about. I will suggest we take the break now. I do hope people have taken notes as I have, and we can come back for those questions after a comfort break, if that's okay. I suggest we come back just before 10 past, so about 7 or 8 minutes, but please make sure we're here for 10 past to kick off again. Thank you. Right, if we could resemble. Thank you all for getting back in time. Just before we do go to questions, I just wanted to thank Simon Blacksall, the chair of We Are Colchester, for coming along this evening. And I wanted to just go over to him and see if he wanted to add an extra minute just of his summary of how things are going so far. Simon, please.
Thank you. I really just very briefly wanted to thank the officers for what's been a very comprehensive presentation, but also for the fantastic work they've undertaken to get the projects ready for submission. And they've done this with amazing enthusiasm and tremendous commitment. As was commented, some projects have had to be pared back, but essentially there's a huge investment, as has been stated, that's about to happen. And for me, this is really positive momentum for Colchester. It's involved a wide range of the community, but also a very positive platform actually in terms of developing relationship with the county as well. So off the back of this, there should be yet more opportunity to get more funds, which of course will be invested in the great town of Colchester. That's it. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Simon. Good to see you. Excellent. So let's move on. I know I've got Councillor Bourne, Councillor Willett so far. I'll start with those, Councillor Young as well. So I'll start with those three. Councillor Bourne first, please. I know you've got more strategic questions, and then I go to Councillor Willett and Councillor Young. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chair. And I just wanted to say what an amazing presentation for, I don't think I had appreciated, not because I hadn't read the documents, of course. I don't think I'd appreciated just how tied in these projects are together, because they hadn't been presented in that way to us before. And I really think, Chair, it would be good for all groups to have that presentation. I don't know if we can force groups to watch the last 40 minutes, but if anyone was going to watch anything of any scrutiny panel, I think the last 40 minutes is well worth watching, so that anyone they'd be fully appraised of what the town deal is and what it means, and to see the synergies coming from that, I think would be really good. So I'd like to make a recommendation that group leaders do something with that, because it shouldn't just be shared amongst ourselves.
Councillor Bourne, I'll actually stop you there and just make sure, Owen, you've captured that, because I think that's a really good recommendation we should take forward. So thank you. Carry on.
So it's a significant spend, and it's a significant piece of scrutiny we're going to do tonight. My questions are just on strategy, really. So what I'm interested in is our risk. So we're the accountable body. I'd just like to know, do we hold all of the risk, 100% of the risk, or how is that calculated? What's the wriggle room regarding any changes? So overspends, for example, on any one of the projects. Is there wriggle room to take from one to shore up the other? It would be a shame if we couldn't complete on one of the projects or part of one of the projects because there was an overspend, particularly with building costs. How is that going to be monitored, and who's going to make the decisions on that? If there's, what's the risk to a change of administration or the change of heart from some of this? Is it as built in as it should be? Because I'd like to see all of these projects coming through to fruition, as I'm sure all the project leads would. But you know, what other risks in change of heart? I'd like to see that fully explained, please. Also, what's the plans for the next business case review coming back to scrutiny? When is it coming back to scrutiny? Obviously, I won't be here. But I'd really like to see a plan for that. And then, obviously in the council, we have undergone a number of fundamental service reviews, as they used to be called, project sponsorship. Various people have led on programmes and projects. And I don't think I've ever seen, I've only seen in my time on the council one post-implementation review. And I'm sure as the executive team, you've seen a number of those. What have you learned from those that you're taking forward to this piece of work? Because it is a huge task, the whole town deal project overview, but it is, I know that we've learnt some lessons along the way. And then a question about capacity. So there are 14 projects. There's a number of doubling up of project leads and sponsors, an overlapping of tasks between some of the projects. And similar organisations are working in partnership with us, like Community 360, health leads in CCG, whoever it is. How have you stopped the burden of those overlapping tasks and going back to the same organisations who have very little staff? How have you stopped that becoming a burden? How is it organised centrally? I've got another question of, outside of the town deal, in the rural areas, how are you planning to capitalise on the learning from this to take into funding arrangements? Adrian, you talked about there are other funding opportunities for rural areas. How will this town deal project help those rural areas with funding opportunities to maximise the benefit to rural areas? And I'm just thinking about our ordinary, and it's not ordinary, it's extraordinary work that officers do day in, day out, because as a local authority, we have statutory duties. And you all have, as part of that statutory duties, you already have a day job, which now includes being project sponsors for town deal projects. So how are you going to manage the capacity of town deal work within all the other work streams that are currently undergoing? I mean, not forgetting we've got a post-COVID recovery plan, we've got a whole load of skills agenda, we've got the huge piece of work around health and the shaping of the health climate in Colchester, actually in this virtual sub-region. So how are you going to ensure that yourselves and your staff are not going to be operating over capacity, so that we can't, as members in particular, a bit selfish really, but as members, we can't push through some other things that we may want to be doing in the next couple of years. Other than that, I think that was a superb presentation, and I really do want to be sitting back in Colchester in a couple of years' time and seeing all of these coming to fruition and more, because I think that is the idea, isn't it? Once these are delivered on, we can show the rest of the world that Colchester does deliver and therefore is able to apply for more funding. Thank you, that's it, Chair.
Thank you, Tina. Adrian, I'll let you take those questions and disperse them as and when needed.
If that's all right, Chair, I'm very pleased. Some of my colleagues are better prepared than I am and have a notepad in front of them and a pen. But let me, if I can, pick up 3 or 4, and then I will pass to some of my colleagues. Just in terms of post-implementation review, I think for me, 1 or 2 of the lessons that I think we've learned. One is about resource. Actually, you know, for a long time, I think that the council has tried to do major projects and not always put the resource, the programme management, the project management resource in place. And that's always been difficult because you have to find revenue funding for it, don't you? Unfortunately, I think the government recognised that and did forward fund some of that and said, you do need a resource. We've been banging on about, please don't give us these capital projects and capital funds without some resource revenue-wise in order to staff it. So for me, that was one of the lessons I think we learned in terms of some post-implementation of other projects, if I'm honest. I think the second thing for me is around a bit more of the discipline of project and programme management. You know, the Green Book approach, which is what government insists on, is a really good approach. And actually, I think we recognised in some earlier projects and capital projects that actually we did not have exactly all of those disciplines in place. So I think that we learnt from that and actually then recognised how we could utilise the Green Book standards in order to be able to demonstrate that we have confidence in delivering these things. I think in terms of the financing, you talked a bit about the financing, and again, I think we've already demonstrated prior to putting these business cases together that actually we have some flexibility to move some funding around. And I know that we are talking and continue to talk to government about continuing to have that flexibility. Please don't set all of these in stone with, you know, this amount of money to deliver that project specifically, because we will have no leeway. So we are recognising that, yes, we will be able to do some of that. We've also already talked to government about increased costs, and we are saying to government, actually, you just have to recognise the reality. The reality is we've already pared a bit back, we've already moved some stuff, but actually if some of these tenders come in higher than that which we have put in the business case, we're going to have an issue, aren't we? We're either going to have to realign the finances in order to be able to do it. We're going to have to go back to government and say, could you please, you know, find a bit more than 19.2 million, you know, another $500,000 or $1 million. I know we're already making that point to government about the increased costs. Or we have to realign some of those projects again, which is, can we do all of that project? Should we do any of it, actually? Because it might be that actually we want the money for other things. And I know the Town Deal Board are quite alive to that, because we've asked them to do that already on a couple of occasions, really. Just in terms of the risks to us as the accountable body, you're absolutely right. Colchester Borough Council is the accountable body under the government's programme. So we have got to account for the financing, and we will be held responsible for how we spend that. And again, you've seen what the Section 151 officer has done about that assurance to date around business cases. That will continue to be done in terms of delivery. We also have already in place service level agreements with some of our partners who are delivering some of those projects. So Essex County Council, for example, has a service level agreement with us in terms of delivering on those things within budget, and if they don't, then actually there's an issue there in terms of their responsibility under the service level agreement. So we're mitigating some of that risk quite clearly. We are not about to push a button on a project that actually is over budget. We won't do that unless we mitigate it with some other funding elsewhere. We're also looking to mitigate any other risks in terms of seeking out other funding. So, you know, a number of these projects actually have opportunities for, and we're already we are actually developing, aren't we, bids for further funding to come in to deliver a greater set of quality around those projects. So there is a set of mitigation of risks in the overall programme. What I would perhaps finally say is, but at the end of the day, you know, we have to still remember that we are the accountable body. So, you know, we have to make sure that we continue with our proper programme management and our proper project management. And then when risks are flagged, we identify them, we look at how we mitigate them, how we deal with them. And I'm quite confident that actually we have the right resource. You've got Matthew here who has, you know, led this project for us at an officer level, but Simon Thorpe as well, and a very small team, but still a team that's been actually paid for by government, which has been excellent, or some of them have been paid for by government, which has been excellent for us to be able to have those disciplines in place. Can I pass to my colleagues for picking up one or two of the other bits? Is that all right?
Shall I make a start, Chair? So there's a couple of things I'd like to comment on. Councillor Bourne, you talked about the fundamental service reviews and the lessons we've learned since those times and the opportunity to review. And Adrian's also talked about the team that we already have in place that have got some fantastic programme project management skills. But since those days of the FSRs, those skills have become embedded in our teams right across the council. So a senior manager, an assistant director, a group manager wouldn't dream of putting a project forward now that hadn't been properly costed, that wasn't subject to the disciplines of high level good practice around project management. So I wanted to give you that reassurance. You also made a point about the rural communities, and I probably should have said a bit more about that in my small presentation about youth facilities. Because one of the reasons for investing in the townhouse, of course, is that there may be problems with our public transport, but it is probably the most accessible across our borough in terms of a place to go and interact with other young people. And we've also referenced Stanway and Highwoods. But going back to the other sources of income, I'm thinking here now of the Shared Prosperity Fund, Levelling Up, all the opportunities that that brings forward that we will link in an integrated way if we get the chance to do so. And also to talk about the relationship we have through the Parish Council Forum, making sure that every opportunity for additional funding is secured. So I think that's that point picked up. I'd also like to make some comment on capacity because we're really busy. You know that. We all work very, very hard, and I'd like to use this opportunity to thank Matthew and his team for the absolutely incredible amount of hard work and professionalism that team has exhibited, and that's why we're here tonight with a credible set of business cases. But as a senior management team, we work really closely together. We're very attuned and alive to each other's stresses and workload pressures, and collectively, we regularly review where we are with our resources to make sure that no one individual is under any greater pressure than they need to be, and bring in and manage and flex resources to deal with that. And I think your other point was about capacity as well in relation to some of the organisations that are represented here this evening, particularly Community 360, a relatively small organisation, but our relationships with those organisations, including our partners in health, is regularly reviewed. We're in touch all the time to make sure that any unnecessary burdens on them are mitigated. So I think those are the points I wanted to make, but other colleagues will no doubt want to talk about other aspects. Lindsay?
Yeah, just a couple of things to add. One of the things I've particularly noticed about the senior team here is that everybody steps up. So with the town deal, pretty much everybody in the senior team has picked up a role. So we've spread them out between us, and different assistant directors have picked up ownership roles on some of the projects, and it just spreads the load. But it also gets that lovely buy-in and commitment from everybody. So I mean, there is an awful lot on, there's no doubt about it. But I think that sharing and that knowing that other people know also what's going on and that support is there has been really helpful. And certainly for me in the digital work stream, Leonie's been invaluable. You know, she's been able to really kind of drive some of the focus on the outputs, you know, that's just been really helpful for me. I haven't got that level of time to spend on it, but she's been able to find, you know, that kind of capacity. So I think it's just an example really of that shared responsibility we have at the senior team, which I think is, I've not experienced that in many places I've worked, so I think that's really special here at Colchester. One of the things we've learned through the business case process as well is the value of that kind of technical support and expertise. So we did buy in some additional help to help us with some elements of the business cases that were really hard. And we offered that as well to all the other partners, and everybody found that very valuable. And again, you know, back to the point Adrian made, you know, we've learned you have to invest sometimes in these processes to then make, you know, the next stage much smoother. And I think we will continue to do that. So as we go through delivery, inevitably, we're going to need quite a level of expertise. You know, some of these, particularly the public realm projects, you know, they're going to need quite tight management around them and cost control. So we'll just bring that, make sure that expertise is part of the delivery of those projects. So again, I think there's been quite a lot of putting into practice lessons that we've learned from the past about making sure we've got the right expertise involved. Just on the ongoing kind of scrutiny, clearly as we go into submission in March, we are hoping for a quick turnaround from government, because we've got some of our projects that are absolutely raring to go. But I think they're all going to be kicking off at different stages. Some of them have got very long lead-ins. We've heard about some of the challenges and the necessary, I think, approach in Greenstead. But some of them, like the Wilson Marriage Centre, they're ready to go. So, you know, we'll have lots of projects at different stages. And I think once we've had the chance to get the funding in and scope all of that, then probably about 6 months on would be a good point for us to come back in and just touch base and show you where we're at with delivery, and just give you that overview of any of the kind of risks and challenges we've already found in that first 6 months, and hopefully some nice highlights of things that are really already motoring. So that's just what I wanted to add. But Dan?
Yeah, I don't think I've got much to add to that. It's a very comprehensive assessment. So I won't add it for the sake of it, but I would say that, in coming back to scrutiny, we might consider, building on what Lindsay was saying, we might consider bringing the business cases back, when they need to come back, and when giving you an opportunity to manage your own capacity constraints as a panel, so that we're not trying to bring everything and go through all of the detail in one session again. And I think that would certainly work. For the Heart of Greensted project, for example, we will, as I said, be developing a full business case. So as we get towards Christmas this year, we will have a lot more to say about the outcomes of all the engagement we'll have done by then, and what that means for the firmer proposals going forward.
Thank you all. Hopefully you're satisfied with those answers, Tina. I definitely was, actually, because I was going to piggyback on the back of Tina's question about the management burden, but all of your answers were really quite comprehensive there. It shows you are working together very well to deliver this. I still think there is an element that it will take your time away from some of the other ambitious things that we are doing as a council before this entire project came along. So I would always suggest that we build in that management fee and bring in more expertise if needed. But I think your answers have been really, really helpful with that. And I'll save my other questions till a bit later, because I'm going to go to Councillor Willits next, please. Dennis.
Thank you, Chairman. I share some of the concerns about the post-implementation reviews that were raised by Councillor Bourne. Not only the immediate implementation reviews to make sure the projects have been done as outlined, but more importantly, the longer-term implementation reviews to see whether the projects have, over time, achieved their desired aim. And it's an unfortunate fact of life that it costs resources to scope the projects, costs resources to do them. And one of the areas that's often forgotten is that built in, and preferably built into the projects and the working methods of the council, we need to be able to identify whether these projects have been successful, not just in the short term, the weeks after they were delivered, but the longer term perspective of their implementation. And when we look at some of the outcomes which are listed in these stream of projects, the measurement of whether they have achieved what we have in mind now, what the board has had in mind in proposing these projects, it is not easy to look at them. I mean, on the youth project, there was an objective of noting the higher than average crime rates amongst youth in the town centre. Well, to monitor whether this particular project over the next 2 or 3 years will have a significant impact in reducing youth crime in the town centre is not an easy thing to do. Resources will be needed on a continuing basis to do that. And it's not obvious to me that level of resources has been included in the business case for the projects themselves, because it's activity which probably needs to be built into the project, how it's going to be done, how we will measure the long-term success and impact of these projects. And if it's just tagged on at the end, well, occasionally we should do a few measurements, it's not going to work. Many of these projects are expecting either to increase the number of jobs directly or to provide the circumstances where jobs will be increased. Again, to measure this is not going to be simple. The social benefits which are coming about from some of these projects, some are easy to see. If we improve the neighbourhood by dropping curbs and making it easier to walk around, we can see instantly whether the objectives have been met. But on some of the more difficult projects, Heart of Grinstead, I mean, we need to understand whether what we're doing turns out to be just a bit of sticking plaster, which has been introduced and perhaps makes life marginally easier for an area of high deprivation, or whether the projects themselves are reducing the amount of deprivation. And I would suggest, Chairman, that to get feedback on these issues, the way it will be done probably needs to be built into the original project so that we have a structure which can either be undertaken by the project, those implementing the projects, or independently as time goes on, to ensure that the value is what we hope it is going to be. And my concern here is that we don't have commitment either within the projects or perhaps more objectively within the council's budget to look at these projects over the next 5 years and ensure that they are delivering what we wanted, and they're not just being written off as it was interesting at the time, some of it worked, some of it didn't, and we're not sure how successful the projects have been in perhaps a 5-year perspective rather than a 1-year perspective.
Thank you, Councillor Willits. I was just noting that down as a possible suggestion to discuss as a recommendation. But officers, can we help respond to that, please?
I'll certainly make a contribution in relation to the youth facilities project, which Councillor Willits specifically mentioned, and I'm in total agreement. It's extremely complex, and what makes it very complex is the difficulty in identifying the direct impact of one intervention as opposed to another. And I think that's why it's quite important that we talked about the connectivity between all the projects, so collectively the impact will be more positive. First of all, I'd pick up your point, Councillor Willits, about the need for embedding measurement and evaluation as an ongoing part of the project. And then my colleague Matthew Brown here this evening would testify to the fact that that's already part of the ongoing review and evaluation process. I'd also talk about our reliance on our partners. So you mentioned specifically the impact on crime. And as you know, our police colleagues who have been very closely briefed on these projects and engaged in the process regularly collect crime data, and you scrutinise that data on a regular basis, twice a year. So they will also give us a sense of what impact we're having collectively on the reduction in crime. I'd also point to our colleagues in health and wellbeing, where we get a very regular indication of how our community is doing, particularly around the incidence of mental ill health and low levels of well-being, particularly amongst our young people. So we would expect over the period of time that you're alluding to see improvements there. Otherwise, we'd need to be looking at why those improvements haven't been achieved. And my final point is around relying on our communities. And we have relied very heavily on engagement and communication with our communities to point us in the right direction and to set the right agenda for the programmes of work. But it doesn't stop here. And that engagement, I'm thinking particularly about the Heart of Grinstead work, which Dan will talk about himself. There will be continual and ongoing engagement in the community, and that's where we'll get the biggest sense, the most important sense of how we're doing in terms of improving well-being across our communities. So those would be the points I'd make. Do you want to add to that, Dan, or does Lindsay? Who's Dan first?
Yep.
Just briefly, yeah, I wanted to say that in response to your question, Councillor Willits, specifically in the business cases, in the management case, there is a detail around how the monitoring and evaluation will be undertaken. It is, going to evolve, obviously, and as I mentioned, taking the Heart of Grinstead programme as an example, we are yet to define precisely what those metrics will look like, but there are some in the business case. I've talked about a few of them today, and we need to work through what success looks like in an area like that and across our partnership. But I might just invite Matthew Brown just to say a bit more about the specifics, if that's all right.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. So every business case had a monitoring and evaluation plan and benefits realisation plan built into it. We had to, that was a requirement. But I take the point, actually, we're tracking all the way through from the town investment plan a year or so ago to the business cases now to the long-term 5 years delivery. It's absolutely a requirement on us, and the project managers who will be delivering these projects and the sponsors who are here today will be monitoring that, holding us to account throughout the whole process. In addition to that, the Department of Levelling Up Housing Communities, also as a partner to us, as the funder, they are also monitoring the outcomes and outputs. So again, we have to have a very robust methodology. So we have to describe what we're going to measure, how we're going to measure it, when we're going to measure it. So just as crude examples, I mean, Dan's already mentioned the Greensted project, lots of work with the community, lots of work with our health partners, lots of work with the project partners that we're working with. Something like the town centre, we might be doing resident surveys, visitor surveys. What's people's perception of the town centre? Do things change? Do things improve? So a lot of work has been done, but I do take the point, it needs to be continued, and it is embedded in the programme. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to finally add to that and to reassure again on the point about resources. So we are able to fund our programme team for the duration of the town deal, so for the 5 years. So we will have the resources in place as well to support the project managers to be able to do that evaluation, because I think it's really critical that we understand it's not about just delivering some of the projects and then, assuming that we will get the outcomes that we've desired. Particularly, I'm thinking about the ones I'm responsible for in the town centre. It's about really understanding what difference have they made, what have they enabled. But we will put, the resources there, which again is, it's slightly different to where we've been before. We are able to properly resource this through the funding that we're being given, linked to the town deal investment. So I just think that's really helpful.
Thank you. Can I just ask the project team at the moment, is there anyone in there with that evaluative sort of background, or is that something you could bring in? You've got the university on our doorstep. Could we pull in further resources? Just asking.
Thank you. So I think it's both answers there. So the university is a partner in the programme and many of the projects already, and we are drawing on their expertise in the university with the Heart of Greensted project, for example. And also in the team, we have quite a strong skill set with the team. One of the officers in the team has actually got a research background, so he's actually really good at helping all of us as a team think properly about, how are we doing this, how are we measuring, because he's got that background. So I think we've covered it very comprehensively. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis is nodding. I'll move on. Thank you. Julie, I had you next, and then I'll come in. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Just to play devil's advocate for a moment, you're working with a number of partners, including Essex County Council, and particularly thinking about, as Dennis Willits was talking about, outcomes. The projects promise a lot, but this is capital money. It's not revenue money. It's about getting the paintbrushes out and redecorating, redesigning, refitting the townhouse and the Stanway Centre and Highwoods. I'm sure, there is some need, certainly in the Highwoods area, for that to be done. But when I think about youth services and the journey that youth service has been on from a county council perspective, it's been, total and utter decline in terms of revenue funding over the years. So I guess what I'm worried about is that we're funding via this money, a lot of maybe new tennis tables and, painting and refurbishment and doing the wiring and getting a building spruced up. But actually, in reality, is there going to be provision on a open access basis for young people in Colchester? And I see in terms of consultation, it's consultation with schools, and it's what do you want the buildings to look like? But actually, the core responsibility of Essex County Council towards young people's provision is quite discreet. So it's SEND provision, children in care, young carers, their statutory responsibilities are very focused on that rather than open access youth services. So I guess maybe my question is more to Glenn, has things changed? Because certainly in 2014 there was a consultation that actually really brought it down to a community capacity building model. We know because of the pandemic that a lot of those community run services have, not been there obviously for the last 2 years. And I don't know what the picture looks like these days in terms of, volunteer provision, frankly.
Thank you, Julie. Pam, to start off.
I will just start off, if I may, Councillor Young, and I'm pleased to see that Glenn is still on the call, and he is in the best position to talk about the vision and plans for the statutory youth services that you're alluding to. However, I'd just go back to the project plan for the for the townhouse and for Stanway and Highwoods. This is about an upgrade, and it's building on existing and incremental, often very important and necessary improvements that have been made over the last 5 years. And it is, in the case of Stanway and Highwoods, about decorating, but it's also about making sure that the IT is at the highest possible level it can be in order to guarantee access, open access in the way you've described for young people. I think I'd like to turn to Glenn, if I may, so that he can give you a sense of that overall vision. But what I would say is that we're working very closely with Essex County Council, and I'm very pleased with the quality of that relationship to make sure we maximise additional funding as well as it becomes available, whether that's the shared prosperity funding that we've really got to unravel at this stage and fully understand, along with levelling up. But for now, you're right, these are upgrades to existing facilities to make them fit for purpose now. Thank you, Chair.
Glenn, we welcome
hello, yes. So with regard to our community capacity building model that we operate across Essex, we have been quite fortunate in Colchester that a lot of our groups are still running. We still have voluntary police cadets running from the townhouse. We still have church-based youth groups. We still have African families in the UK. We have a new group that has just recently started in the townhouse that was started by young people, supported by our youth work team that we're recruiting volunteers to. So yes, the buildings are being used. Yes, we are still delivering. My staff team during the pandemic, whilst a lot of services were down, carried on delivering street-based youth work, also supporting communities with doorstep visits, and more recently, obviously, a lot of work with Afghan refugees that we've picked up. So yeah, our service still is there. We bring in additional funding to develop projects, and we continue to grow and develop the work we're doing with young people.
Thank you, Glenn. Are there any further questions while Glenn is there, Julie, to?
Well, I mean, I could go on, Chair, but I'll leave it there. I've never been a particular supporter of how things have gone in terms of community building model. Again, they're very discrete examples that have been quoted to us. But, what I would like to see is a facility where, children or young people in Colchester can go and enjoy various things on a much more open basis rather than relying on the police cadets. If you want to be a police cadet, you're going to go. If you're in the refugees group, yes, there's something there for you because that's based on refugees. I'd like to see much more open access for young people in Colchester to use service, and I'm not sure we're going to get that.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Glenn, for your input on that particular question. You may be asked to answer some more later, so thank you for being on the line. I'll just come to some of my questions at this point. I'll start with strategic and then go down to more detailed. First of all, I was quite pleased in some of the answers you gave earlier, particularly, Adrian, a response about rising costs. Just with the Bank of England looking at costs of inflation increasing to around 7% within this year, just a quick calculation sees us at 1.3 million pounds just through inflation on the entire budget. Is that something, bearing in mind it is clear and open to government, something we can go and ask government for inflationary increases in our 18.2 million? I was generous and didn't include the extra million they'd already given us. My second question would be, again, around sort of risks, could be down to the finances, but risk and responsibility when it goes externally out to other organisations, for example, with Essex County Council. Again, I appreciated your answer, Adrian, you gave earlier on the SLAs, so those agreements. But I just wanted to understand that you were confident and the Section 151 officer were confident, because we know, we've seen projects, I've experienced it in my short time on Essex County Council, that projects do go awry in terms of timing and finance, and if that is completely within the SLA, as you intimated, make sure that's wrapped up. But we want to see projects delivered, and I just think we've got the ultimate responsibility here. We need to be absolutely satisfied when it goes out to someone else to manage that that is going to be kept on time, on budget, etc. Because I have confidence here, it's when it goes outside of our hands. Thirdly, in terms of more strategic points, scrutiny and the further scrutiny of this. So that again has been touched on in some of your answers. I'd like to hear tonight at what point we will scrutinise again those projects. It was discussed in all of your answers, I think, but just whether they come back individually or whether they come back as a whole. And that quality assurance and financial assurance. Just going down into the detail, one more strategic point. Levering in further funding. Again, you've touched on this. When I was part of this process, we were looking at levering in a substantial amount of funding. On top, it was kind of, you had a quarter almost of the funding being available from this government pot, and we would be scaling up to around just short of 100 million. How much of that is still being levered in? The Heart of Greenstead project that Dan outlined, we're leveraging in quite a substantial amount there. Are there other examples of big investment or even private investment to go with the government and third sector organisations? On the detailed points, the Essex County Council William Marriage site, similar to Julie's question in terms of youth, I want to know how open will that be? I'd like to see that being as open access as possible. We had recently, not so much in the last few years, but the Greyfriars memories and the learning shop and people talking about the skills-based opportunities in Colchester. I still think Wilson Marriage is hidden away. It's just off, literally where it is sort of just off of the street, and I don't think people know about it as much as when we had Greyfriars as a skills-based institution. And I do think we need to be more open with this offer at Wilson Marriage and the investment there. So I'd like to understand how we do that. And do we link with the learning shop people, the people who have been talking about the Greyfriars experience, who have, I think, sadly given up trying to reopen such a thing in town, but can we link up with them with Wilson Marriage? Business case 6, I was actually just going to make a point that the project team having the DCMS lead and someone from the BBC, I thought that was fantastic, so that's great. We're always ambitious in Colchester, so why not get the high-level best people we can? So I'm very pleased about that. Business case 2, back to the townhouse. When discussing in a subgroup that we had about the youth zone, we wanted to ensure if the youth zone wasn't going forward and transport links to that, which were identified as a major concern, then how do we guarantee in the project, which goes beyond, of course, the boundaries of the town deal, but it should be within the SLA with Essex County Council, and Glenn hopefully can help here, about engagement to the rural areas. That is part of the Essex County Council offer at the moment, and I don't think we have enough from the townhouse. So this money should be able to revamp the townhouse, but also catalyse the work that they already should be doing in terms of engagement into the wider communities, rural communities that we have in Colchester. We know we have an urban centre with a very rural borough around it. And linked to that, what engagement is going to be done or has been done with Stanway and Highwoods to this point, knowing that they're going to get some investment. Last question on the townhouse, and Glenn, when I toured it recently with him and Councillor King, did explain the ownership, because the ownership is not entirely straightforward. There is a trust that the townhouse have. I just wondered whether that ownership could be made more clear during this process and even solidified back within the direct ownership of the council, that being Essex County Council. I've just got 2 more points. Business case 5, the heart of Greenstead. I've always had concerns about the engagement here, seeing responses coming back from the community. So actually I was pleased to see, Dan, that you had outlined as a concern and as a risk engagement and not engaging enough, and you seem to have understood that. And I was pleased to see the engagement timeline and the early start that you outlined today. So I still think that needs to continue on. The reasons that we are trying to do this project are also reasons why it will be tough to engage and difficult at times to engage. So I think we need to absolutely acknowledge that from the start. And on that redevelopment, you talk about future homes. I think that's absolutely key in terms of net zero housing, but also accessible homes, homes for life. And I just didn't see that in there, so I just wanted to highlight that as an issue that I think is really important. And I was going to ask about the mix of housing, but again, that was covered, so thank you for that. Lastly, I will say all of those things I've talked about so far are constructive criticism on what are really good, positive business cases, and I'd love to see it all presented in front of us. What wasn't presented as much, and perhaps there's a good reason for it, was business case 4, the Essex County Hospital site. I've agreed with politicians from across the floor on this site not being at all favoured to go into the town deal. One of my questions would be £500,000 going into this site. What is this money being used for, or what will it deliver beyond what we would expect a developer to deliver in a development site anyway? Those are all my questions and points. Thank you for listening. Hopefully some answers.
Chair, if I pick up a few, and my colleagues will either build on those or certainly pick up the specific business case points that you've made, if that's all right. So certainly in terms of risk and responsibility and partners. So, for example, Essex County Council. What I would say is the Section 151 officer at Colchester has a statutory duty to sign these off to say that he is satisfied against those criteria. Exactly the same process has taken place at Essex County Council on all of them to make sure that they are also satisfied that these business cases have a level of proper professional assurance. So what I would say is that I do believe Essex County Council are fully engaged in that process, those risks, those responsibilities, and I know Essex will also continue to pay due attention to the monitoring of the delivery and whether or not we stay within finance, within budget, on timescale, and to identify clearly if there are risks, what are we doing to mitigate that? So what I would say is I think you get 2 for the price of 1, and if nothing else, I think Essex County Council are very good at that. They will actually make sure that the disciplines are in place, as well as making sure our disciplines are in place. So I have certainly a level of assurance from my point of view, and I think from my colleagues' point of view, that Essex County Council will provide that sort of role going forward, even if they don't have a full statutory responsibility for it. By all means.
So, Chair, I was pleased to hear your confidence in our ability to deliver, because actually I'd probably say the greatest risk lies with the Borough Council. A lot of the projects that are in our responsibility area are those that are associated with rising costs, public realm. So a lot of work has already been done to understand the impact from some of the learning, as I explained earlier. So I do feel much more confident around our ability to deliver some of those. A lot of the projects are also contributions of funding. So, for example, Jumbo is a contribution towards what will be a much larger National Heritage Lottery Fund bid, and it gives them a good platform to progress that bid now, because it shows the commitment from the Borough Council and partners for them to be able to progress that, but they know that our contribution to that project is fixed. So this is now for them to go and raise the additional funding that's required to bring that project forward. So in terms of our risk exposure, it's lower than in those where we would be solely responsible for the whole delivery, but clearly we've got to support the North East Essex Heritage Trust to be able to bring that wider National Heritage Lottery bid to fruition. So, you know, there's different risk elements within the different projects, but I think we're very alive to all of them in terms of the cost management. The couple of other things I wanted to say in terms of the leveraging of the further funding for the projects that I'm particularly involved in. Some of it, you know, once we get the commitment at the next stage, the funding can be released, that then unlocks the ability for Community 360, for the Jumbo project, to then put forward, you know, their bids for further funding. So they still remain absolutely in the plan, but they haven't been, nothing's been accessed as yet, because without the commitment of our funding, they don't have the initial match to kick that process off. The only one I'd say that, as I said earlier, I'm a bit wary about is the Active Travel Fund. I think we were really confident about that when the first two rounds of Active Travel Fund were announced. I think we were really confident we'd get 3, but the announcement on that has been delayed and delayed and delayed, so we still haven't had it. And I think we're slightly nervous, although we are obviously lobbying Essex County Council, who will get the whole pot to then distribute to make sure they know that our scheme is a high priority. But as I said, we've got mitigation in place. We will deliver we'll deliver the key aspects of that route and then seek other funding to be able to complete the final works. On the Wilson Marriage Centre, I think it's a really good question. And one of the things that they at Adult Community Learning are really excited about is that this has a separate access. So the beauty of developing the old gym is it has separate access. They're going to put in separate security access as well. So physically, it's not reliant on the main building being open. And they've been quite precise about that because they want it to be accessible for use by community groups, by businesses, you know, any kind of use outside of normal working hours. So we've really encouraged that because I think it will be critical. And they also are keen to encourage drop-in, so there will be a cafe sort of style as well to get people through the door who might not perhaps want to or have thought that they were able to, you know, improve their digital skills. So they have thought about it all the way through, which I think is really good. Actually, that's quite good development of that site. I absolutely agree with you about it still being a bit hidden. I don't know that the council has necessarily helped with its requirements around signage. We've got a bit of work to do to make sure that facility is really well promoted. But again, through the Town Deal project, there's been so many connections made, you know, with the other projects, with the other, the Digital Skills Hub, with the new community hub run by Community 360, that I feel really encouraged that we can actually bring that access out to everybody. Just on the Essex County Hospital, yes, apologies, that was completely my mistake. I should have mentioned them. The public realm investment there, again, it's fixed. So the exposure of the council and the Town Deal programme is limited. They know they've got a 500,000 contribution and that's it. What it will bring in addition to what they would have delivered, I think is what they are putting forward is really twofold. One is to make sure that the connections to the previous use, it was a previous public building and public facility. So there's been a lot of work done around the archaeology, and they've really opened that up. There's been some really interesting work done around the archaeology. So they really want to make sure that they're building on that in terms of connections to the local community, etc. And I think they also are planning on building a public realm space that's open to the community. And they didn't necessarily have to do that within that context of that site. They could have made it just available to the residents, but they don't want to. They want it to be, you know, adjacent to the road and open to the community. And they've already started, as part of the demolition work, to build really strong relationships with their local community. They have a particular spokesperson who, you know, they work really closely with, so they're managing the impact of the development, and they want to continue that, so it's seen as a space for the local community. I don't think we would have secured that had that not been through the town deal investment.
Chair, can I ask one? Sorry, did you want to come back on that?
Sorry, yeah, if you don't mind, just first of all, on the Wilson Marriage Centre, the ACL, just about Greyfriars and the links, just that link, I think it would be wrong to miss out on making that link. I'll just leave that with you and see.
I'll take that one away. I don't know the answer to that one, but I will take that one away.
And I would say on the Essex County Hospital, I thank you for trying to answer. I'm still not convinced. Back to you, Adrian. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. I was just going to ask my colleagues to pick up one or two of those other business cases and your specifics around those, together with levering in funding as well, because I'm sure they can pick up some of that. And Pam, I'm sure, in terms of further points about youth facilities and openness, although I think, you know, Lindsay started to try and identify that for you. And I wouldn't mind just coming back at the end to talk about scrutiny and timetable, if that's all right.
Thank you, Adrian. So I'll just restrict myself to the questions around youth facilities and maybe go to Glenn about the very specific issue around ownership, which Councillor Young raised. So first of all, I've noted with interest the importance that members are placing on open access, and Lindsay's touched on that to some extent. And in relation to the townhouse, I mentioned earlier in my presentation the importance of the townhouse in terms of a central location which has the best access and accessibility to public transport than perhaps anywhere else in the borough. And I know that doesn't overcome some of the issues that young people face, very often travelling in the evening alone, and there are some really significant issues that I don't want to underestimate around that. I wanted to pick up the point about access to young people in the rural communities. And I think there's a particular issue there in relation to social isolation and what that means in terms of the inability for young people from some of our rural communities to mix with other social groups and to access all the benefits that their counterparts in other parts of the borough enjoy. I do know from what Glenn's told me that 5 additional volunteer roles will be created as a result of the investment in the townhouse, and there is absolutely no reason why those volunteer roles can't be focused on outreach work to communities that aren't going to directly benefit from this investment, such as those in the rural community. You also picked up on the point, Councillor Corey, about engagement, and I hope that to some extent Matthew highlighted the importance we've placed from the very beginning of the programme work over the whole period of the 5-year life of the programme on engagement. And engagement did take place and will continue to take place, led by Ben Randall, who I know you know, who leads the youth service, and he has made put a particular emphasis on the importance of engaging with user groups. That's particularly relevant at Highwoods with regard to the young carers support group that have a very specific set of needs that need to be reflected in the improvements that are going to be made there. That engagement will be ongoing through the life of the project to make sure that any improvements, and let's just remind ourselves about the size of the budget here, it is 170,000, which isn't going to go an awful long way at Stanway, and 120,000 at Highwoods, but we are absolutely determined, first of all, to make the most of that investment, and secondly, to make sure it is closely aligned to what the users of those facilities need. And with cognizance also being paid to who isn't using those services, and making sure that outreach work reflects the changing needs of that community. So I don't know if you feel able to bring Glenn at this moment into the conversation in relation to the point about ownership.
Thank you, Pam. Glenn, please.
Yeah, with regards to ownership, the building is held in trust by a management committee, which are absentee landlords currently. This has gone through Essex Legal Services, and we still have a long period of time left on the lease, over 70 years, I believe. So it has been left as business as usual, as there's no sign of the lease changing, but legal services were happy with that.
Thank you. And just while I've got you, Glenn, just guaranteeing in terms of the investment, perhaps the town deal investment being directly into the building, but guaranteeing, as I know members, we talked on the subcommittee about the youth zone, and with that not progressing at this particular point, ensuring that we have rural engagement out from the town centre. Pam talked about volunteer roles. Can you just give us a bit more confidence and assurance on that, please?
So part of my team's role is to support and enable communities to develop their youth work, and that'll be through street-based youth work, but also working with communities to develop new youth provision. We've just opened a new youth group in Tiptree, and are working with some volunteers and my staff team to run a local youth open access youth group for young people from that community. We're also looking at working with partners, parish council, council, I think yourself, with Witham Hoe as well, to support developing some more youth work there. And that will continue out across any sort of community rural areas. We obviously have to look at how we support each community to meet their needs, and look at it on a case-by-case basis. But my staff will be out there working with volunteers. The 5 new volunteers is a minimum. We'd love to recruit more than that. Also develop young volunteers, 16-year-olds who are really keen to get into youth work. We've got 2 new apprentices starting in Colchester soon. So it's all about growing our own youth work, growing young people to come into the service as service users. If they want to stay in and become youth workers, we support them through training and development, and hopefully on to becoming, well, taking my job in a few years' time.
Thank you, Glenn. That's good to hear, and hopefully with the investment we'd see a further expansion in the apprenticeship offer and that kind of training you've just talked about. Thank you. Adrian, back to you. And one point that hasn't been picked up yet was the inflationary costs and the ask of government. That's all. Thank you.
Chair, I just didn't know whether you wanted to just hear from Dan in terms of the Grinstead project and some of that levering in of further funds. Happy to come to Matthew on the inflation part, and I'll come back to it if I need to. And finally, your scrutiny timetable, if I can.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. And just briefly on inflation, so I think the Bank of England's currently predicting 7%, as you say, returning down to 2% after perhaps a couple of years. And of course, these business cases have been developed within that inflationary environment, is all I would say, and it's something that we are clearly looking at every day as part of our ordinary business, as well as building into the financial cases for these business cases, but also thinking about our agile approach to project management, how we actually do flex and adapt, and ensure that we don't just allow costs to spiral out of control, that we look at our requirements, we look at the specification, we think about how we can leverage in other funding. On Grinstead, I did mention that the town deal fund of 6 million, the estate regeneration bid of 2.3 million, and we have to thank Matthew Brown for his key role in leading that estate regeneration fund bid. We're also expecting and hoping that Homes England, as one of our key investment partners, will be able to put in potentially 5 million, depending on the housing mix that we end up with. And not forgetting, of course, that the scheme now includes an assumption around council HRA borrowing of 28.4 million. The whole value of the Heart of Grinstead programme is 41.7 million. And we expect still to be able to draw down additional funding as we progress. And we're already getting offers of support and resource from our health partners, for example, very actively in the programme. Just wanted to pick up also the question you had about accessible homes or lifetime homes. We have, of course, already within the heart of Greensted 36 homes which are a combination of a sheltered housing scheme. It's a combination of enhanced sheltered housing and also homes for people with disabilities and access issues. So it's absolutely essential that we provide for them in whatever property, whatever homes are developed or refurbished as part of the scheme. So that is absolutely key. Matthew.
Thank you, Dan. So just very briefly on cost inflation and cost rises. In all the business cases, but I'll go particularly at the town centre business case and the Greensted business case, we've done some very specific cost modelling, both ourselves as council with our colleagues Amphora, and then they in turn have gone out to external cost consultants in a number of projects to kind of get a third and even fourth opinion on costs. So we can absolutely have really robust. We've actually inflated the budgets wherever necessary to allow a really sensible contingency budget for construction costs, cost inflation. We've looked at that really thoroughly. So I think certainly on the bigger projects, the high risk projects, I can give absolute confidence that a great deal of work has gone on behind the scenes just to get really robust and realistic, going back to that's an important word, realistic cost estimates for these business cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. That's really assuring. The only thing is, it sounds like we are incorporating the inflationary increases, which is good, absolutely fine to do. I'm asking whether we can go to government, because if we're incorporating it, it means we're probably doing less than we could have done, because we're understanding we can't do as much because of the costs. So are we going back to government, as Oliver would, and asking for more, please?
We have, along with probably everybody who's involved in the Town Deal programme. There has so far not been a response on it other than the ability to, as we've done particularly with some of our public realm costs, rescope them. So there's been some flexibility for us to have a look, but the envelope that we have is the envelope we are bidding for. And at the moment, there's been no commitment to be able to extend that. But we have made those representations along with, as I say, I'm pretty certain almost every local authority involved in this in the country. So,
thank you. Well, it's good to hear that answer that we have asked, because there's lots of money being wasted at the moment. I'm sure 1.2 million wouldn't go amiss to give to us, but I'm sure, as you say, everyone around the country is doing the same. But thank you for those combined answers. Adrian, back to you.
Chair, if I can just pick up the scrutiny point about timetable for scrutinising. Clearly, your panel will want to look at recommendations. Certainly from my point of view, I think it would be very helpful if one of your recommendations was around the fact that you would like perhaps to see a timetable coming back so that you can see when individual projects or the themes are in a position to be able to be scrutinised. What we're looking to do is to put in the bid. We're hoping as soon as after the 24th of March, we will get government announcement that we have been successful in the further 18.2 million that we're offering. But clearly, as you've heard, some of those projects are in different stages, aren't they? So if you're happy that you say would look at a recommendation around, we would like to see a timetable, then what we could do is we could certainly go away and we could say, actually, we can timetable these in for you over this period of time, because I think that would help us identify exactly where the projects are in terms of the stages, and when it would be meaningful for you to have a look at scrutinising the delivery of them, rather than try and scrutinise all of them again, because they'll all be in different stages. So if you would be satisfied, and then of course we'll bring it back as part of your work programme, and if you want to see other projects earlier or later, then that can be flexed. But I would suggest that we try to do that in the knowledge of what we've got around delivering each of those projects.
Thank you. Members have heard that. I'll let them think on it, and we'll come to a recommendation soon. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Nigel, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. Sat here very quietly. I did write some questions down, but Tina leapt in and asked most of them, so I listened for all the answers. It's fascinating. I've enjoyed what we've heard about tonight. It'll be interesting to see how it all develops, and it's a tremendous amount of work has gone into it. One point I still haven't quite grasped, the thing that worries me about all these sorts of bids is that you have sort of a peak and then or trough each side of a peak. And it's what happens after that peak has been reached and you're coming down the other side. I think the funding, as you say, you can develop other bids, and that's very much into that one-known expression of unknown unknowns. And I think there's a lot of work that could be there that we may not get additional funding for, that needs to continue. I haven't quite heard the answer to how we are going to work that one through. I think we've got to have some, what's the best thing to say? Some sort of understanding of how we are going to take these things forward once the funding has actually stopped. And that is quite crucial, I think. And the other one, I may have missed the answer to this one. I don't understand quite how much funding the government has provided the Borough Council for the work it is doing. I understand you've got some of the money now to do that, but are the projects providing funding for the Borough Council's work as well, or not? I just think how much of that is the council's having to commit itself, if you like. And I'd quite like to have I don't think I've had clarification on that. Oh, there's one final point. I assume we talked about scrutiny. I assume the other thing we can get is ongoing sort of assurances from the Section 10151 officer on how he sees his project developing. I think that would obviously be useful as well. He obviously will be looking at them if we could have those reassurances as well. And the very final point, a small one, but what is the We Are Colchester group going to do going forward? I haven't heard them mentioned sort of once, I don't think, in the last hour. I just wonder what their role is in the future.
Thank you, Nigel. I think the 151 officer point will come in that, wrapped up in that scrutiny and how we understand it going forward. That I think we need to answer as a recommendation. But otherwise, I'll go to Adrian for the other points. Thank you.
Matthew, do you want to pick up some revenue funding and how some of the government's funding's already been utilised, which hopefully will give you some confidence?
Thank you, Adrian. So going back to the start of the programme, back in sort of 2019 into 2020, the government actually awarded the council some capacity funding, which was designed actually to basically recognising we had extra costs, we needed some extra capacity in the team. So we actually recruited a programme officer and an engagement officer who are with us, fortunately still going with us now. So that enabled us to do that. That money was then extended. There was a smaller allocation of funding to enable us again to meet those programme overheads of running this programme. And then additionally to that, in the last, I think 6 months ago, the government has already awarded us a 5% upfront payment, which has again enabled us to meet all of the costs that we've incurred recently. So we've talked about business case development. That's quite an extensive process. There's a lot of work that has to be done, not just internally, but you have to pay a lot of consultants to do a lot of work and plans and details and so on. And that was fun. So that's been pre-funded by government up to a limit of £910,000. So we've that kind of money's, so that's enabled us to that's helped with the cash flow. That's helped us to not incur costs that we can't then recover. Thank you.
Chair, in terms of, if I pick up the town deal board itself, and I think Councillor Chapman's quite right, we haven't mentioned a lot about the town deal board because they are extremely important to us. They are part and parcel of the governance arrangements that were laid down by government, that you have to have a board which is independent from the local authorities' jurisdiction, and that board will continue. That board will continue to look at delivery, will look at outcomes, and actually we certainly see it as an addition to Colchester in terms of an externally a member, a board to actually do that work and give that assurance from business perspective, because there are business people on there, a representative from Hiscox, for example, really important in terms of the skills that board member brings to the community, to some of our statutory partners, etc. And we have a number of other agencies that are positioned on that board and have a stake in Colchester, such as Homes England, for example, the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, for example, those are our board members that have a set of skills to do and look at this particular programme from its inception through to its delivery. So they will continue in place, and I know that the chair of the board at the moment is certainly looking forward to taking that board forward after we have hopefully got a successful bid from government. I don't know if my colleagues want to pick up any other points. Lindsay?
So I think the first question was about a bit of contingency planning. So I think you're right. A lot of the work and a lot of the projects didn't start with the town deal opportunity. They'd been around for some time. So a lot of the town centre ones came through some work we actually did originally with the bid and others to identify opportunities. So, you know, the opportunity the town deal has brought is we can bring some of those forward. And also, I think every single project has had to, as part of the business case work, look at their contingency plans as well, so the what ifs. So, you know, I think there's quite a lot of work done around making sure that, you know, we're in a good place to deliver all of these. And regardless, I suppose, of whether we get cost increases or, you know, how the whole programme is going to hang together going forwards. When I'm thinking about Jumbo, for example, you know, they've had to put contingency plans in place. You know, they will have to make further funding bids with our support, but we would want to see, you know, the continued investment in that project going forward. So I think that's what the question was about, contingency. If I've got that wrong, Councillor Chapman, do let me know.
So, yes, I think it's really just to make sure that these projects could continue if we didn't get the additional bids, with the opportunity to make additional bids. So often, as I said, I've seen these bids successful, and something so happens, you actually then fall below that level because you can't fund the ongoing projects, and they just sort of fizzle out, if you like. It's not letting them fizzle out if there isn't that money coming in.
I think, if I may, Chairman, for me, I think part of the question is about sustainability as well, stability as well. So I think Councillor Young made the point about capital, not revenue funding, and actually part of what's in the financial cases that we're preparing is understanding of that sustainability. So, for example, on the Heart of Greenford, we need to make sure that the beautiful community hub is not running at a loss year on year. That means that things have to be broken down or it can't be maintained or anything like that. You know, we have to understand those ongoing revenue costs and how they're going to be met so that we're not just constructing white elephants. Thank you. Councillor Bourne, quickly.
Thank you. I just wanted to make the point that in order for the town deal not to turn into something dry and dusty, which it won't, perhaps you could use some of the language around the Olympic 2012 legacy around volunteers, because there's an element that could easily creep in around it's being done to people. The town deal doesn't have, it's not that it doesn't have the support of the communities, but it doesn't have the buy-in. You know, what's relevant for me? And in the same way, there isn't a pot of youth workers out there, because there isn't. There isn't a pot of care workers out there. There isn't a pot of a lot of people out there. But one thing we do have in Colchester is a lot of people. And people have re-evaluated their lives since COVID. A lot of people are now working part-time. And it seems to me that the town deal could go back to that ideal of joining in, because we need people to volunteer. Community 360 are a big partner in the town deal and have a volunteering arm. And if we want something to be sustainable, we need more volunteers, particularly for youth. So, you know, every parent wants their child to go to clubs. Virtually every parent has got their child on a waiting list for uniform group and all sorts of clubs because there aren't enough there. Well, those people aren't going to suddenly appear overnight. They need training and all of that. But they can be supported by volunteers. And you know, it is up to all of us to encourage people to volunteer. And I was just looking at it's a really old website from gov.uk about the Olympic legacy, 2012 legacy, and it just says, you know, bring a +1. You know, volunteer with a friend. You never know. And that is something that we're always looking for new people to do. I want someone to do something. You know, find all these people. Well, they're not there. Trained people aren't there. But volunteers bring an enormous amount of energy and enthusiasm and may want to go on to increase their skills, particularly in the communities where they already live.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bourne. So you're absolutely right about the makeup of our volunteer market changing dramatically during the course of the pandemic and as we move into recovery. You're also right in saying that Tracy Rudling, as Chief Exec of 360, is on the board, and she will be holding us to account in relation to the way in which we make the most of the very vibrant volunteer market in Colchester. Just a couple of things to share with you. So 360 commissioned a piece of work called Communities in Crisis, which was a real insight undertaken by the University of Essex into communities in crisis and the roles of volunteers within those communities. And we also commissioned a piece of work from Anglia Ruskin University, which you may have seen and read. It's a very moving piece of work. And you talked about the uniform exchange, and there's an example in point, which is featured in that work, that talks about the willingness of people to step up and provide for their communities. And both of those pieces of work, in addition to other insights, have given us a really good understanding of the nature of the volunteer market. So I wouldn't think it was unrealistic at some point in the near future, when the We Are Colchester board meets again, to have a specific item on the agenda, possibly with Tracy's agreement, led by Tracy Rudling, about how do we, with this fantastic array of programmes of work and investment, really liberate that volunteer market to make the most of the opportunities that we have. And it's particularly relevant in the youth facilities investment, but I'm thinking about the absolute strength of the community in Grinstead. I can't tell you anything about that. You know, you and other ward councillors know the strength of that community and the dependence of that community on people stepping up in volunteer roles and doing their bit for their community. So hugely significant opportunity for us. And I think once we're secure with our bid, we then have an opportunity to go out to that market with the help of our partners in the voluntary sector and really put forward an attractive proposition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we've exhausted the questions, exhausted the panel members. I think it has been really, really useful, actually. I couldn't have seen it going any smoother or better this evening. So thank you all for coming here and contributing. Thank you to those online, on screen as well. I do think we are going in the right direction. I do think that coming here is helpful to give constructive feedback. And I think there are a number of points listened to this evening by you as officers, partners on screen, partners clicking through the screen. Thank you, Matt. And the chair of We Are Colchester board as well. So I think we've taken a lot. Thank you again for all those answers. The 3 points that I think as chair I've taken here are this. Number one, recommendations. I think we would like to scrutinise, we would like to have back to our panel a timetable for scrutiny going forward. So we have a meeting on the 15th of March. That may be too early for the bid to bring back a timetable. But if we can have a timetable to the next meeting, of the first meeting of the municipal year, so I recommend that a timetable is brought to us with a brief update of where the projects are, and then the ability of the scrutiny panel to work into their work programme the thematic business cases. I think that's the best way to bring them back. Yes, you might say this project in this theme hasn't gone anywhere yet, but these others have. I think otherwise bringing them back just individually wouldn't work. So in themes, if panel members agree to that. So Owen, hopefully you've been able to gather that recommendation to bring back a timetable either in March or to the next municipal year meeting that sets out when we will next scrutinise the items on a thematic basis. Then I want to note two other points. One is to note the point that Dennis made at the beginning, that Cabinet must give attention and an assurance, really, that item C on their report is given full attention, because that report is not actually for us as such, it's for Cabinet, and we need to be assured, because we haven't had perhaps enough time, no one ever would, to go into full detail, but we've been really assured by the answers this evening. So note number 2 would be, or note 1, would be that Cabinet, we're assured that Cabinet look into decision C with the full time and attention that it deserves. And the second note for me would be to pick on the point made by Councillor Bourne at the end, to ensure community buy-in, and that buy-in is delivered sustainably through volunteering. Is that something we think could be noted? I think that's a good point that we've touched on throughout the meeting, but Councillor Bourne has kind of really anchored it in at the end there. Owen, how's your summary of that going?
Just to check, Mr. Chairman, would you like to take that first one regarding a timetable as a formal recommendation, or indeed as a resolution, and then the others are points for us to note for Cabinet to then consider?
That's exactly what I was looking for, thank you. Panel, how did you find that? Are those conclusions satisfactory? Councillor Bourne.
I made mention of a possible recommendation at the beginning about group leaders using the presentation from today. So it needs the most maximum or the widest possible exposition.
Thank you, Tina. At the time, I jumped in and said how good that was and asked Owen to note it. So if you could drag that back up again, I think that's really, really useful. So 2 recommendations, definitely that one. I'll come back to the wording. I've just got Councillor Young indicating. Councillor Young, Julie.
Thank you. I'd also like to add something about open access to professional youth work to support skills and human connectivity, because I'm unconvinced with the model that currently exists, and I don't want this to be, a revamp of a facility, because we could do that anywhere, frankly, Chair. We are investing in the townhouse and Highwoods and Stanway, and I want to see, for the sake of our young people going forward, that is seen as a centre for all young people in Colchester, and not just those who want to be a police cadet or are in specific groups.
Thank you. So would you suggest that's a sort of a third note to be made? Thank you. We talked about open access, didn't we, of not just youth as well. So I suppose we could, I don't want to dilute it, I share your passion for supporting young people, of course. I don't know whether to say open access to the revamped facilities, the adult learning college, but primarily the youth service buildings that are being revamped, that open access is committed to. Are the panel satisfied with that further note? Okay. So, Owen, we have 2 recommendations. One about the timetable. Secondly, a recommendation that group leaders take the presentation from this evening and spread it around. Can't think of the word, circulate it. Ensure that it goes to all members of the council, because it has been so valuable, and we can always cut it and edit it and then send it around. So that's quite a clear, short recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Bourne, for that. And then the third recommendation the third note added by Councillor Young. Do you think you've got that in a satisfactory way?
Yes, I think I've got that.
Okay, do panel think they've got all of those recommendations and those 3 notes in their head? So recommendation 1, for a timetable to come to the next municipal year meeting to outline when we're going to see the next thematic cases. Recommendation 2, to ensure group leaders have a 3-line whip on sending this presentation out. And then we have the 3 notes, which I can't remember all of them now, that Cabinet pays absolute attention to item C and gives us assurance they give time and attention to it, that we ensure community buy-in and sustainable volunteering through the projects outlined here, and thirdly, Councillor Young's point about open access to the youth services, but also the adult community learning that we added on. Remembered them all? Hopefully you do. Are we all okay? Can we approve those recommendations and note that we've reviewed the content of this report? Agreed? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all. It has been a very good meeting. Despite it being cold, I feel warmed by the discussions tonight. Thank you. And thank you to those on screen again. Good night all. Thank you. Panel, we haven't needed to go into the confidential items, so we don't need to do that.